Good morning, everybody. Hey, why don't you grab your coffee and things, and let's find a seat. We're going to get started. As usual, plenty of seats up front. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our fall Strategic Leadership Council Summit. You can tell, if you haven't seen already, on your tables is the agenda for today, and we really have quite a few topics. I think a lot of exciting things to update you on. We've got teams who've been doing a great job over from the spring summit over the summer and into the fall. And so we're really excited to give you an update and have a dialogue around a lot of these activities. But to kick this off, we're especially honored today with a special guest who's going to be saying a few words. And to do her introduction justice, I'd like to invite John up here to give you a little opening background on our special guest. So, John, I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, everybody. How is everyone? Excellent. So as the Strategic Leadership Council continues to become different iterations of itself with the work that's being done in so many different areas, I had the opportunity, as several of you in the room have, for example, Rob Cleveland said, I think I've been in the room with Hillary 9 times or something like this in the last, because obviously economic development is a significant portion of what we're doing in our communities and in our region. At the same time, though, I was honored that the governor would appoint me, a Republican who sat 2 seats from her and often sneered at her when she sneered back at me. And I thought, well, that's awfully nice that she would consider what we're doing in Southwest Michigan to be important enough to have a former legislator such as myself to be at that table to have a conversation about what is happening with growth in our state, or stemming the tide of loss of population in our state, and all the other metrics, which, amazing, the Strategic Leadership Council utilizes those very same metrics that were identified by the governor in its entirety in the executive order that established a new cabinet level position. That cabinet level position is Chief Growth Officer for the state of Michigan, and we're blessed today to have Hillary Doe, the new Chief Growth Officer for the state of Michigan, and the woman that has been in some 95 meetings in the space of the last 4 months all over the state of Michigan. I know it's been over that many in total, but my goodness, all over the state of Michigan, trying to understand just exactly what's happening. Here's the key that I said to Hillary, though. I said, the reason you need to see what's happening in Southwest Michigan and in Berrien County in particular is that we're asking those questions and have been asking those questions from an evidence-based, fact-based perspective for many years now. We are doing some of exactly what you're suggesting needs to happen at the very start of the conversation statewide. Challenging as it may be, we might just have something we can share with you. So with that, I wanted to have Hillary come forward and offer a little bit of update on what's happening as Michigan's Chief Growth Officer here in the state of Michigan and the appointee from our Governor, Gretchen Whitmer. So please welcome Hillary Doe.
Hello. How's everybody this morning? Thanks for being here so early. And sorry in advance to those of you who've heard me speak many times already. I apologize. Is there a slides or anything like that? Sorry. If there is, I'll handle it. And if not, no big deal. Thank you. Thanks. I'm excited to share a little bit with you all today, but as was already said, frankly, I know there's a lot that I can learn from all of you too. It's been great to get to be here this morning with truly, really awe-inspiring, really visionary local leaders who've already taken on a lot of tough work over the last handful of years. And it sounds like have had, many successes, in addition to learning a lot that I hope that we can learn from at the state level. But of course, the challenge is a big one across the state. We have seen, as you well know, declines. Michigan is one of 34% of states that have seen population declines, and many, many more that have seen stagnation. This is a nationwide, challenge for us to really think about what it takes now in this new era to attract talent and to grow our populations to hang on for what it's worth to folks. And it's really different region to region. So when I started the job, the sort of first order of business from my perspective, in addition to, overseeing the council, which John participated in, it's been so great to have about 90 leaders from across the state be a part of. The first order of business was really listening to Michiganders. Because there's no way for us to get this done unless we have broad, nuanced sense of what it's going to take to grow each region and have buy-in from organizations across the state that want to be partners. Our agenda here cannot be any politician's agenda. It cannot be fickle. It cannot start and stop in a few years. It's the kind of thing you got to really lock arms around and commit to and be in the fight for, because it's going to require structural policy reforms, experimentation and pilots, marketing and branding, you name it. And we're taking a really broad-based kind of ecosystem approach to growth. So as you heard, I'm Chief Growth Officer, and I'm the first one for Michigan, but also this is the first position like it in the country. I hope that means that we'll be the first movers here. And even though we're one of many states with this challenge, we'll have a right to win it and a right to come out in the front as that first mover. And we'll only get that done if we do it together. So I'm very grateful to all of you for being here today and hopefully be the first of many conversations we can partner on together. So I'm going to flip through some slides to give you a sense of, sort of what we're tackling statewide. It sounds like based on the work you all have done, many of this will be review. You've already been in it for some time, but I want to share what we've been sharing with communities across the state. And then I'll also share a little bit of what we're hearing. I'm particularly curious what we've heard across the state that's resonant with all of you and what that feels, different or unique in this region so that we can, build together going forward. So as I said, if we did nothing, if Michigan did nothing, it's currently growing at a third of the national growth rate. And that's striking. You'll see the example of what that looks like in a chart going forward. But for different communities across our state, I've been so struck by how emotional this issue is. If you go to the UP and you talk about how they've lost, 48% of their school-age children in the last couple decades, people think about population decline as a loss of a way of life in some instances and a desire to hang on to quality of life, public services, their local schools. In other instances, population growth or lack thereof is standing between us and leading the nation. In some of these high growth industries, we have a right to lead the nation on. We're number one in climate resilience. We're so strategically positioned for investment, but we need talent, of course, to be able to rise to the occasion. And those things work together, having jobs and being able to attract folks here to our state. So whether it's standing between us an incredible opportunity or preventing us from hanging on to the quality of life that we all love and want to celebrate here in Michigan, it is so emotional for folks to say, yeah, I want my grandkids to be able to come back here and work with us. Yeah, I want to be able to grow my business here and never feel like, it's there. I have to go in order to achieve what I want to achieve. So for all the reasons, it's critical that we take this on and that we're successful at it together. Now, there are two major trends in Michigan specifically that contribute to our population declines. Again, these probably won't be news to you, but one of them, of course, is our negative domestic migration. We're an outflow state, right? So as a state in total, we're losing more folks than we gain domestically each year. We're successful at international migration, though we struggle a little bit with retention at that 3-year mark. So we're looking at that. But the real challenge here to offset that, natural birth change that we're seeing across the country and frankly in many countries around the world is that green line. The middle is 0. So as long as you're below the middle, you're losing, more folks than you're bringing in here in Michigan. As folks know, we're good at attracting students as well. So we're successful at recruiting folks here to come to school, for example. But again, hanging on to those folks and keeping them here has been a real challenge. So we have to turn this around. And the other challenge we have, which you all well know, is higher average age than our neighbors. And those things actually go together, because when we look at who we're losing, about 45% of the folks that we lose for job-related reasons. It's one of the primary reasons folks leave the state. About 45% of the folks we lose for those reasons are between 18 and 34. So they're not just taking themselves somewhere, they're taking themselves and their future spouses and their families somewhere else. And that continues to contribute, right, to the higher average age here in Michigan if we lose our young folks to other neighboring states or frankly any state across the country. So these things go together. They also present really different challenges. One of the challenges with our population declines is we see major workforce gaps in things like healthcare, for example. And we need to think about those as we're thinking about caring for and wrapping arms around this aging population. Last thing I'll say about this slide, if folks have seen the population projections and think they're sobering, you've all should check out, and you probably have, the labor force participation rate projections, because they're a lot worse. As you see folks choosing to retire and what have you, we have to have young folks able to come behind and fill those seats. And that is arguably the most sobering of graphs. Now, how do we take this on? When the governor brought it to me, it was pretty obvious we couldn't do what a lot of states have done, which is one tiny pilot program to fix them all. It won't work. This isn't a silver bullet kind of solution. Again, we need to take an ecosystem approach and think about structural reforms, think about, pilots and experimentation, think about marketing. So where we started was from a really pragmatic, data-driven approach, which I think I share with all of you in this work here. We started by looking at states across the country. We looked at counties across the country. We've looked at archetypes for growth in our communities versus communities, in every other county in the country, over longitudinally to see what different growth patterns we can find. And what I would flag is, of course, that, even though there are for example, some states that have seen strong growth for, in Sunbelt states, for example, for weather reasons, we're not going to pipe the smell of orange groves into, our drive-through windows in Michigan. So that's probably not going to work for us. There are still a lot of comparable states out there that we can really look to and learn from the North Carolinas to the Colorados, Minnesotas, folks that have, made different investments, taken different trajectories, and Michigan has a lot to learn. So we're pulling all of that information into our council work. At a county by county level, one of the things you'll see are, people tend to move to places, not to states. So you can sort of look more specifically at who's seeing growth and who's not, and what those reasons are. You can see the remote worker shift a little bit here. That's why we're seeing some growth in our northern counties and some declines in places like San Francisco. And I'll skip through this, but I'm happy to share it afterwards. I mentioned this work, I think, to some of you. This is a McKinsey study, but basically it tracks every community by these different archetypes and gives us an example to compare to. So for example, Lansing at one point longitudinally looked a lot like Nashville and what's changed over time. And some of the things that we'll run into are in Michigan. Our challenge with median incomes. That's one of the things that you'll see. Growing places tend to have rising median incomes. We're struggling with that. You'll see, affordability of housing, which historically we've done well at, but now we're really struggling, as you know, with stock and being able to keep up with housing. That's a big challenge. You'll see graduation rates increasing and education outcomes improving, which is something Michigan struggled with for a long time. You'll see transit. And so we really need to look at those things carefully, grapple with them, and think about how they go into our regional plans and our state level growth plans. But again, if we did nothing, here's the population projection. The only thing good about this graph is you'll always know how many people live in Michigan. It's been 10 million for way too long. And I'd prefer to have, other problems. So we really want to change the shape of this curve. And that's the intention of the work that we're up to together now. Like I said, the governor is the first one in the nation to say we're going to take this on holistically. And the Growing Michigan Together Council that Governor Whitmer announced in June, at the same time as she announced my position, is meant to be the first action there. So we convened, like I said, almost 90 Michiganders across the state to talk about everything from infrastructure in place, jobs, talent, people. I think the list is here. Pre-K-12 education, higher ed, and really grapple with, are we competitive? How do we compare to other states? Well, how do these different measures track to population growth? And what brave, hard, hairy challenges do we need to take on and commit to long-term in order to have a good shot at growing Michigan, and coming out on the other side, taking advantage of that opportunity and really maintaining our quality of life that we're so proud of here. So those groups have worked. The work groups have produced initial recommendations to the council, and the council is working on those between now and December to decide what can we come to agreement around. This is an extremely bipartisan effort, an almost even split, plus a couple independents. So the intention is to come to a place where we can really commit long-term and again, not be fickle. We've seen states like Tennessee, for example, really commit to an economic development strategy and not, I think someone said whiplash this morning, not get whiplash over the long term. We need to know what direction we're running in together and really lean into it. So the idea is getting by December a real sense of what those big structural reforms we can do stateside are that can really set Michigan up for growth. So we're looking at ways to, future proof, for example, prevent some of the big challenges we see coming around the corner, like infrastructure investments that are going to be really challenging in an environment where you have more EVs, for example. We're looking at talent attraction and retention strategies, and we're looking at how to get more folks in the labor force by making changes across all 4 of these areas. So I mentioned at the top that when we started, the work groups were always going to be a major input, their ideas and their sort of, recommendations to the council for their consideration. But the other major input, and I hope you'd agree, that's critical, is that we have to hear from Michiganders. And so we've taken on what has been, it's been told to me is the most ambitious public engagement effort around something like this that we've seen. So far, this is a little bit outdated. We're over 3,000 individuals engaged. Certainly, we've hosted ourselves this many events, but we've been to many, many, many more. And this number of universities, I've since done my UP swing. So I think we're at sort of 10 out of 15. And our intention is by the end of November to be at, over, again, 70 events that we've been a part of and participated in. We'll have 1,000 surveys back from Michiganders across the state. We'll have over 4,000 folks engaged in this effort and really seeing themselves, hopefully, in the solutions that we put forward. But I wanted to share a little bit of what we've heard. Again, I'm curious what's resonant with you all that you've talked about before and what feels, different in your region. One of the first things, of course, you'd expect, and we very much heard it loud and clear everywhere we went, was, of course, that our natural beauty is a top asset. And I will say that we, to date, over 60% of our sample has been folks that are 18 to 34. And we've really skewed hard listening to folks at community colleges and universities and young workers across our state. If we don't have a value prop that works for them, how do you grow the state between now and 2050? So we've really listened in particular to our young folks when we collected some of this feedback. We've also heard that there are, some real, challenges. And I think that I get into those. Okay, so in our stakeholder meetings, for example, housing rises to the top everywhere I go. I know you all are thinking about housing. We're seeing company towns springing up across the state, people resorting to really, bold, is the positive frame, I guess, really difficult measures is the more negative frame in order to attempt to tackle housing across our state. And it absolutely rises to the top, both as one of our opportunities because we have relatively good affordability on housing, but also as a major challenge no matter where we go. So housing's there. We've also talked with folks across the state a lot about regional specific strategies. So you'll see those in the recommendations and acknowledgement that it's going to be different region to region. We've talked about the importance of storytelling and the marketing side of our work. We've also talked about childcare. That comes up over and over again, especially if you're looking at labor force participation rate. The number of folks that want to work and choose not to participate because of childcare or elder care is a really consistent piece of feedback that we've received. I don't know if it's on here, but I already walked through the goals. But I'll say flag for among young folks, transit is also just everywhere. Good solutions for transit are critical, and in different communities, that means different things, but we're taking that really seriously. Finally, I wanted to share a national poll, in particular, one tidbit that I thought was really interesting. So we did a poll of young folks across the country who live in cities that are growing among the 18 to 34 set. So cities that have been successful at attracting those folks are hanging on to them and are growing among those younger folks. And we asked a lot of questions, but one of the questions we asked was, what would it take for you to consider a place you've never thought of before to call home? To really think about if you're sitting in Austin, picking up and moving to a place you've never thought of before, what would it take? And we gave a ton of options. We said, what about just cash transfers? What about, student loan forgiveness? We're just really, taking the sort of, restrictions out of the way and throwing a lot of things out there. One thing blew everything else away, even in the youngest set, even in the 18 to 24 subset, and it was a down payment on a home. And I thought that was such an important piece of feedback. Not that we need to take that on or that needs to be the project. That's not my decision, right? We're making these decisions together. But I did think it was compelling, right? I don't think a lot of us assume that, a 19-year-old, 20-year-old is thinking, well, if I had a down payment on a home, I would consider it. But that is such a major boundary, right? Between us and thinking about a place where we want to put down roots and live long-term, having access to ownership is such an interesting angle for us here. And it underscores how critical housing is for us to get right and figure out. So we're learning a lot. There's a lot of positivity here. Our Michiganders want to stay, but again, leave the state often for job or personal reasons. They want to choose Michigan. And yet, we see some real challenges when they go elsewhere. It's often because of, affordability of availability of transit, walkable communities, housing, what have you. But we have a shot at this if we lock arms and do it together. I truly believe that. I've been so encouraged being in so many communities across our state, how willing folks are to take this on. It's really captured the public imagination. I think to date, there have been over 800 articles written about this effort since we started in June, because folks want to win here. They know it's an existential problem. And I know that we won't be able to do it unless we do it together. So some key takeaways from all of that work, both from our work groups, from our public engagement work. If there were 3 legs of the stool, these are the things that have really risen to the top. Taking this on will mean access to great opportunities. That means thinking about jobs now, jobs of the future, how to make sure we're providing good jobs and encouraging good jobs locating here in our state. Great places to live, work, and play. So this is placemaking. It's not just one thing anymore. Both things really have to move together. And we have an opportunity here with, for example, remote workers and a younger set who are really thinking about place when they're thinking about where they call home. And also welcoming communities. We're successful at attracting international folks, for example, but struggle to hang on. Are we welcoming to business? Are we welcoming to, young families from other places? We're really examining that to make sure that we wrap arms around the folks that are here, are doing a great job at retention, and are also able to attract folks from other communities to Michigan. So I already plugged the work groups, but I did, since John's here, I want to plug 900 collective hours. You all worked really, really hard, and they rolled up tons of recommendations to the council for their consideration that were really ambitious. They looked at local government challenges. They looked at local capacity. They looked at, restrictions that have prevented us from investing locally. They looked at transit. They looked at funding for infrastructure, pre-K-12 changes, higher ed reform, publicly funded pre-K to 14, you name it. I mean, it's a broad swath of issues, and I'm so eager to see what comes out of the council in December when we deliver those recommendations to her desk. I'll share these with you after. There's sort of more than we can review together today, but these were the high-level recs from the pre-K-12 work group, and there's more obviously sub-bullets than can fit on a slide, but really a bold commitment to changing our education outcomes, which we all know really lag the nation. Higher ed, which included thoughtfulness about getting more workforce into our higher ed institutions to ensure that folks can see their futures here, in addition to making sure that affordability is never between us and higher outcomes. And then Jobs, Talent, People had tons of really interesting recommendations, including, I'll flag, a real investment in thinking about how we can do better at entrepreneurship and innovation. Folks know nearly 100% of new jobs in our state come from small businesses and entrepreneurs. And what we see right now are lots of patents, lots of, highly educated folks starting companies, but then leaving Michigan right at the time when they're getting ready to scale and hire their first 100 jobs. And we really need to be thoughtful about that. So I was proud that Jobs, Talent, People rolled out recommendations there. We already talked a little bit about these because this is a work group that John was a part of. Hopefully you feel as proud of it as we do. So many good things came out of that the council's rolling around in. Happy to speak to them, but it really spans the gamut from those considerations around local government, housing, all the way to, for example, development ready sites, which will be critical to our growth. Okay, so I will leave you with this QR code. No one, there isn't a menu on the other side. I'm sorry in advance when you scan it, but think of it as your act of public service. If you're willing to take out your phone and scan this code, what it lets us do is collect a few more pieces of information from your region in particular. And I promise you how I'm taking this so seriously. My first life was in a think tank. So I'm, a data nerd, and every piece of data we receive, we're munging and we're sharing with the council for their consideration. They'll receive initial report actually on Wednesday and another before they make final recommendations to the governor. These recs must reflect all our regions and they must reflect Michiganders, and they will, because we're committed to making it happen. So feel free, once you scan the code, you'll also have the link to share it with your organizations, with your communities, to make sure that we get lots of voices in the mix here. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here with you all today. This is our site. If you want to go read those initial work group recommendations, they're all available at growingmichigan.org. You can also give us feedback there. But mostly, I just appreciate your time. I know it's early, and I know that you've been in the hard work for a long time, and you're starting to see the results. I can't wait to be a partner to you. I hope what this does is throw the gas on to the incredible work you've already begun and help us really grow Michigan. So thank you so much for letting me be here today.
Is it all right if we do a few questions?
Of course,
You've got a few minutes.
Yeah.
I have one microphone in my hand. I have another microphone here. Happy to have anybody. There's a microphone over on the left. Slide the bar up, ask questions.
It's early. We might need caffeine for questions. Okay.
My name is
Yeah.
John Eaglehoff. I'm the director of the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission that serves the 3 counties of
Yep.
this part of the state. In the midst of your presentation, you mentioned our regional plans. I'm putting little air quotes in there because there really is no regional plan for this region, and nor are there for
a
any
lot.
other region. So my question to you is this something that's in the windshield for you all? Is this a consideration where we distill a lot of these concepts into a single regional plan that is then operative for the rest of the organizations within the region and the state itself?
Yeah, I'd love to follow up first and talk a little bit more about that. What's in the recommendations right now is an idea that, we'll deliver these initial structural policy reform recs to the governor, which are often statewide. And then we'll begin the work with all these regions we've engaged to do growth planning, region by region by region, with all the right folks at the table. And that will be the first challenge, making sure we get everybody at the table to do exactly what you're describing, but not just, I would say, from a sort of traditional planning perspective, also thoughtfulness about, what our distinctive competencies are. What do we want the regional marketing message to be? What kind of talent do we really need to attract? What sort of distinctive competencies do we have to build our economy locally? So we're going to try to build basically comprehensive growth plans with all our regions, assuming that recommendation comes through. But I think it's critical for what it's worth. I don't think, again, we have to be committed sort of for more than 6 months at a time here to really get this done. And there is so much nuance. I was flagging that even the west side of the UP and the east side of the UP have tons of, nuance. So my intention and what I was grateful for when I saw that rec is as soon as we start from this statewide effort with structural reforms that are, state level, we can begin that regional work in locking arms with all of you, but also our regions across the state. Yeah. Other questions? Everyone's heard me speak 9 times, John, so they're like.
Have there been any high-level policy reforms identified so far in the process?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, if you go to growingmichigan.org, the work groups did roll up all their suggestions. What I showed you is just sort of the high level, but the full recs are available on the site, so you can see all of those. Happy to speak to any in particular, but I think that across the 4 work groups, they delivered, I want to say 46 distinct ideas that they are encouraging the council to consider. And we'll see what comes out the other side with the council. Obviously, one opportunity I think we have at this stage, and I'm sure you ran into this in your work group, John, but is, they were starting from these sort of 4 silos. But as you can imagine, when you think about placemaking you'll inevitably start talking sometimes about talent or jobs. And then the jobs, talent, people group, you know what I mean? There's sort of they were in silos to start. So one of the opportunities we're working through right now is how do we knit a lot of these together into sort of coherent strategies that will come out at the end. So we won't be at 46 at the end, but I hope where we'll be is a really, coherent set of bold proposals for the governor's consideration. So yeah, you can check all those out. And they're a diverse set. They also, I appreciate, didn't sort of limit themselves from the beginning. I think, you'll see recommendations in that list, like thinking about PK-14 or thinking about some bold local government reforms or shared services that, might historically folks might have shied away from. And I think that a charge like growing the population, something that's so difficult as this, and that we know is really difficult, is such a good call to action to get to these bold reforms that we've been hungry for and needing in the state for a long time, because it's the kind of problem you aren't going to solve accidentally. We're not going to like wake up and trip over it and start growing, and I think what it does is calls all of us forward to really be willing to try on, the boldest things. And the fact that we got those bold solutions out of really diverse work groups, diverse in every way, including across partisan spectrum, is pretty encouraging. Yeah.
Hillary, first of all, thank you for being here. And we share your passion for the need to grow in this state, in our case, in the county. And mine's more of a statement, but if you want to cross great ideas, best practices, or pilots, we're well organized. Let us know, work with John and all that. And, we'll take great ideas anywhere. So just let us know. Thank you.
I so appreciate it. And I'm listening and taking great ideas from all of you too, very much a two-way street. But yeah, I mean, we talked about this a little bit. I think experimentation and pilots and room for agility will be so critical in this work. So if there are 3 buckets, there is the structural policy reform bucket, there is the marketing and branding bucket, but I think there's also a real intentionality in this work to allow for experimentation. Now, I'll disclose my most recent gig prior to this one. My first sort of career was in public policy. So I got my master's in public policy from U of M, and I worked at a think tank for a long time. We did a lot of sort of local pilots that we scaled across the country. So I love that as a concept. But I think influencing me even more at this point was the last 10 years that I spent running a tech company. And the truth is, fail fast and quick agility and real experimentation was part of it. I mean, I have to be careful not to accidentally sound like a tech bro sometimes, but there's been a lot from that work that has applied to this challenge, a lot that doesn't, but a lot from that work that has applied. And I think one of those things is a willingness from a sort of state kind of pilot and policy perspective to try things on and then call it if it didn't work and not be upset about that, and instead just iterate and give it another go and sort of keep plugging away at it, because we're not going to get it right the first time, but I think we will get it right. So I'd love to partner with all of you. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Thank you. You've given us an idea about good states to look at. You mentioned Minnesota, North Carolina, and Tennessee, specifically from the talent pipeline perspective. And are the other good states that we should look at? I'm all about entrepreneurialism, but let's rip off and duplicate too, right?
Yeah, definitely. There are tons of good states. I mean, again, you can look at it at the state level, which we're doing, but also even in states that might not be seeing comparable growth, we might see regions that are doing really interesting things. So let's see, in terms of states, Washington, Colorado, Minnesota, North Carolina, they've actually, the reason I like those examples is they've taken different tacks, but seen growth, and they do have some things in common. So when we talk about metrics, for example, they are all doing better than we are right now at their percent of 4-year degree holders. They're all seeing growing median incomes. There's some things you can kind of track, but they also lay out different pathways for getting there. And I think that's really important for us to consider. But in addition to those, we've actually taken a deep look at even at the local community level, swings folks have taken and experiments they've tried for talent attraction and retention, for example, or for placemaking or what have you, that seem to have worked, so that we can kind of, see what's relevant to Michigan and grab from those. One thing that I found compelling, it might not be exactly get at your question, but maybe it's useful for someone in the room. When we were looking at talent attraction, retention efforts and campaigns at the city level, there are a lot based on Tulsa right now. Folks familiar with Tulsa, the $10,000 to move? And when you look at those, they have really kind of scattered results. They'll often be good at moving folks up front, but then why would you stay? You know what I mean? So there's kind of struggling a little bit on the retention side, though they've been successful with entrepreneurs building an incubator there. I found it really interesting that even without those cash transfers, Vermont's program seems to be as effective and arguably more effective at retention. And what they did is so low tech, folks. They basically offered tours. They're like, you come, we'll make sure you get out here, we'll take you around. And I think there's something really like there's some wisdom really deep in that. Because functionally what they were doing was introducing you to the barista and introducing you to some local small business owners. And you could imagine who you'd invite to your first dinner party. I know these things sound sort of warm and fuzzy, but I think there's real wisdom there that programs like that, everybody's looking for, right, is community. In addition to a job, of course, but for example, take a remote worker or this like need for both the three legs of the stool for the place in addition to the job. You know, those kinds of programs are really critical. So in that vein, one of the things I'm talking to right now is a guy, Brian Boyer, who runs the nation's only urban technology major. It happens to be at the University of Michigan. That's a bunch of computer scientists thinking about placemaking. And they're exploring for us what could immersive onboarding experiences look like, where someone could zoom into Berrien County and have a sort of an immersive experience where they're virtually meeting people in the community and having conversations and seeing where people live and seeing what the beach looks like and just having a really different experience than like visit Detroit page or visit Michigan, you know what I mean? So we're sort of thinking about how to put community into the equation when we think about driving growth. And I think that's been an interesting insight. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah. Hello.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good to see you again. Further reaction came from the community breakfast. All right. There we go. Is that better? All right. I've actually been wondering a lot about H-1B visas. I know it's one slice. But if you have an H-1B visa and you lose your job in the United States, you're out.
Yep.
You're gone. And Canada just changed their law. It said if you lose your job, you have 4 years to find a new one. And I'm wondering, is there a public policy possibility that the governor can get an exception to the H-1B visa national rules and have a Michigan specific where we get first many more, and then second, the flexibility to be able to compete with Canada?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, our federal affairs team, every time they talk to me now, is already like, are we going to talk about visas? Because it's been on the docket at the federal level. So we should talk about that, and including exceptions. For example, if Michigan is truly going to manufacture, be the sort of arsenal of the green transformation, we need folks to do it. Maybe that's a sufficient argument in an era of the IRA and all these other big programs. So I'm open for sure to getting creative at that level. But there are also some opportunities, and they are documented in some of the work group recommendations right now here in Michigan without changing federal policy. So you'll see, for example, that our universities could be, giving out tons more visas than they are. And the challenge is that first job. So we could be, for example, thinking about startup visas or allowing incubators to sponsor visas or thinking about AmeriCorps-esque programs being able to sponsor the first visa so to help some of our businesses who want to keep those workers but are struggling to be that first employer. So there are a lot of suggestions in that regard in the mix. And I mean, I think as I've traveled the state, the number of regions for such diverse reasons from, hospitality industries to high tech industries that are conscious that we've had open jobs for too long and we cannot fill them and we need this segment to be successful. It's overwhelming. So it's absolutely on the agenda. So I'm about it. Happy to make good trouble with anybody who wants to help on that front. Yep. Anything else? All right. Hopefully you're a little more awake instead of a little more asleep after that. Yeah.
You mentioned transportation a number of
Yes.
times, and I'm wondering what your discussions have led you to in terms of sort of reinvestigating Michigan's transportation plans especially for the west side of Michigan.
Yeah. Well, as I think folks have noted today, there have been lots of fits and starts. I think that's one of the things that's most notable. Like every region has had something that hasn't worked, basically, it feels like everywhere we go. there's a couple recommendations. One is related to how we think about and fund transit. So there's a recommendation there to support more broad-based effort. I think what we've seen, if I'm speaking out of turn, so this is just me, but this is what I've heard. This is my interpretation. I feel like the theme is that we've tried transit a million times, but maybe at a too small a scale. So the systems are insufficient and then no one will use them. And so the experience is, we know we need transit, let's like get started, and then it's not useful transit. And I say that I love Detroit. I say that with all the love in the world, but the people mover, for example, might be an example of this. Like, as much as I love to go from parking garage to parking garage around the city, that's not really our transit system. So I think that, that's a silly example, but there have been lots of sort of bigger examples of that, systems that don't really connect, what have you. So one of the areas of consideration is, what would it actually take? Let's do the exercise to go all the way and like build transit in our different regions that's actually effective, and just like stare that in the face for a minute. And it might be too much and we might not be willing to do it. There might not be political will, but we know it's undisputed that regions that are growing have transit and that we don't. And if we have one Achilles heel that we're worse at than anywhere else, that's it. So the sort of recommendation at the moment is, what would it really take from a sort of investment perspective? And then we're actually looking at what are the sort of unique ways for us to leapfrog. All of you are going to Google this later because I'm going to sound completely unhinged for a minute. But one example of that is our trackless trams is one of the things that we're looking at, because basically they give you like a light rail experience, but you can get them on the road as quickly as you can. A bus rapid transit system, they're not as expensive. Is that a good option for a place with a lot of sprawl like Michigan? Other countries have done it, but not really domestically. So are there these, first funding, and then are there these leapfrog opportunities for us to get a little ahead instead of just keeping up with the Joneses on transit? Yeah. All right. Want me to flip? I see you. You're ready to go. This is the next slide. All right. Thank you all so much.
So I'm Lauren Hamill. I want to welcome you all to the Upton Education Center, and I want to thank Hillary. That was an outstanding presentation. We really appreciate that. We have a new strategy at SLC, and here it is, and that is to make Hillary our BFF. You think that when you think of Berrien County, we want you to swipe right. There are no other choices. In fact, I think it would be appropriate to take this action. We want to commemorate this commitment. I would like a motion to add Hillary as an honorary member of SLC. Do I have that motion? All right. Do I have support? Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. There you go. You're now one of us. So thank you, John, for giving me a couple minutes to just tell you kind of where you're at and what we're trying to do to serve our community. I've got just a couple, I think, slides to show you. So you came down what we affectionately call Main Street. That is designed to help you navigate to everything inpatient, everything outpatient visually. And I think you're going to find it is a much better experience than you'll get in most hospitals that are built in the 50s in this country. So I hope you enjoy that. And we've got a few other things that we've done recently. We've reconfigured our emergency department. If you've ever been to our emergency department and were hungry, my apologies, you had to walk a mile for a sandwich. We've now connected that to the rest of the facility in a way that you can get anywhere from our emergency room. We've also done something else that really is unique. We created a very significant family support area. As it turns out in our community, when people have tragedy, it's not one person that shows up. It's often 15 or 20 or 30. And we made a very nice area with its own bathroom facilities, its own counseling facility adjacent. We've made an area where large groups can congregate when there's a tragedy. And we think it's going to be very, very helpful. We also are making some changes with how we configure specialty care. We're bringing some of that specialty care closer to the hospital. That's really important for a couple reasons. When you have a hard time recruiting specialty physicians, we're a small town. Most of our specialties are 3 or 4 or 5 doctors, if we're lucky. And so to make sure that they have the most productive time, to make sure they can see the most amount of our friends and neighbors bringing them close to their inpatient work, I think is going to be extremely valuable. We've done that already with our neurosurgeons and our pulmonary critical care physicians. We're going to do that next with our surgeons and our urologists. We're trying to make the access for our customers very convenient, but I think you'll find you'll have more access to that specialty care once that's all completed. We're also we just opened last week a beautiful little chapel that was designed right off Main Street. You'll see it on the way out, about halfway down the hall. Just watch to the right and duck your head in this space. It is really a very, very meaningful spot. Spiritual care is a really important part of health and wellness. The literature is just filled with examples of that. And we wanted to make sure we made a space for that within our facility. We're also investing in Niles, a new intensive care unit there. What you see in the picture is actually our bariatric ortho unit, one floor adjacent, but it's going to look much like that. We're also making significant investments in outpatient clinics. Most outpatient clinics in Berrien County are about at the end of life. Not all of them, but many of them are. And we've built a new one in Niles, building a new one in Bridgman, one is slated in Stevensville, and a number more are coming. We're also really pleased that we have, there's the Bridgman Center. We're also really pleased that we have a space to do things like this. When we envision Main Street, one of the things we hope to be able to do is to get families and children into the facility. This is an art show that we co-sponsored with the Boys and Girls Club. You see the art on our gallery wall. You also see here that we took the children throughout our facility, gave them a tour. You know, we have about 200 different jobs here in healthcare. And what I'm doing in these pictures of those children is recruiting them to become employees at Corwell Hill South. And so you see, we took some places you've never been, including some of the biggest generators you'll see anywhere in Berrien County. They had a really good time looking behind the scenes in healthcare. We're also working extremely hard on talent pipeline. Here are 7 different programs that our CNE, Natalie Baggio, Dr. Baggio runs she's our nurse executive, runs our nursing programs. And Stephanie worked with her on to create pipelines for nursing. And we do everything we can to get people interested in prereqs, then interested in LPN, RN, 4-year nursing. We're also doing that with respiratory therapy. We have programs with high school kids. We call that a growth, I think it's up here, yep, a growth internship. We actually pay kids in the summer to come work for us with the notion of creating a bit of a pipeline strategy, interesting them in jobs in healthcare. And we have discussions with Michigan Works and others to help grow that pipeline. We want to keep your kids and your grandkids right here. We want to make sure we find jobs, if we can, for them in Berrien County. We also are doing our best to invest in the community. You'll see here a number of partners that we have invested in. We have given about $1.75 million in grants over the last few years to external organizations that are doing something with health and kind of health related. By the way, if you haven't kept track, everything is related to health, whether that's housing or transportation or income or justice or family structure. Everything that really matters in your life has some link to health. So it has been very rewarding to find folks across the community that are touching various of those kind of components and investing with them in our community. Those are things we don't do, but we absolutely want to support others in doing. We've also made a major commitment to health equity. You know, the difference in mortality rates between some census tracts in Berrien County is how many fold? 2-fold, 3-fold, 19. Yeah, it's unbelievable. And we're doing our best to understand what's driving those differences and try to save lives across our community. So with that, I think that's all I have to say. And I think we have, is it Mike and Eric? And I would just like to remind you, we have a new bar in how quickly you need to present your material. Hillary, you really set the high bar for that. I like that very much. So let's see if you can be as productive as Hillary. Thank you.
I am terrified right now. All right. So here's the plan. I'm going to talk about identifying good paying in-demand occupations. And John gave me a challenge. He said, can you do it for Berrien County? And I said, I only have 2 weeks. But we've been doing this research for a while. And John, I want you to know, we got it done for Berrien County. And I'll be presenting those results. So first point, estimating good paying in-demand occupations is required by a lot of programs, federal and state. Second, there's no consensus on how to do it. Third, national and state long-term projections, which I love, they do assume full employment. And fourth, in Michigan, we only produce projections at the state and at the prosperity region level. And so what I'm proposing is a macro model to give you actual estimates over a 5-year basis, which I think is consonant with your training programs, and to do it at the county level. And I can aggregate it up. So if you want more than one county, I can do that as well. So that's the game plan. I'm going to go quickly over the first until slide 10. I'm going to slow down on slide 10. The first set of slides are background. Background in terms of these points that I raised about estimating the requirements for estimating jobs and how we do it. So I'm not going to do a reading of these bullets. It's basically what you can see here are 3 bullets on federal programs and 2 on state programs, all of which require estimating in-demand occupations. They don't always say good paying, but a lot of them do. Going Pro, Michigan Reconnect, ETA, if you're familiar with the Employment Training Administration, they all require these reports. I'm going to show you 2 slides on the variety of ways that states produce their lists of in-demand occupations. They're all good, but they're all different. Most states use more than one statistic, but there's not a consensus. And ETA, which funds all the states to do this, does not actually provide guidance in terms of you must do it this particular way. Most states use projections, absolutely, but then how they use the projections varies. So some use online job ads, some use employment growth. And you can see from the list, there's just a variety of different ways that states take on the challenge of how do we estimate in-demand occupations. So I'm going to be no different. I'm going to give you my proposal. I think it's the best. No, I'm just teasing. But the thing is, you need to have a proposal that you can rationalize, that you can justify, and get, as Hillary did, get feedback from the folks that you're presenting it to. Does it make sense to you? And so that's the kind of feedback I'd love to get today. You might be asking, well, how does Michigan do it? Well, Michigan has 3 elements in there on job openings. Think of, say, if employment were to grow by 1,000, right, over 10 years in a particular occupation. That may mean that that net employment growth is accompanied by 5,000 job openings a year because people retire, people hopefully stay in Michigan, right, Hillary? But people also leave the occupation. So there's a big difference between net employment growth and job openings, which is why the first 3 are due to job openings, then the net growth in occupation, and then finally, what are the wages that are being paid? I think these are wonderful measures. And you may be familiar with the Michigan Hot 50. They do the Hot 50 for a variety of different elements, such as just overall, also by educational attainment. What are the Hot 50 for? Those with less than a bachelor's degree, those with post-secondary non-degree certificates and things like that. They also do a STEM Hot 50, for example. When I say problems, I should say probably challenges. I used to run the national projections at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I love the projections. And I think that what I'm proposing is a complement, not a substitute to the projections. You want to have 10-year projections that say where the economy is going to go in the long run, where the economy, what it would look like if we were at full employment, so you can have guidance on training. I also think as a complement, you need to know where is the local community going to go in terms of the actual economy, okay? There's no consistent method across states. The 10-year projections do use full employment, which I think is reasonable, but I think we need one that looks at the actual macroeconomy for an area. And the estimates are not made at the local level. So what I'm proposing is a 5-year model, one that projects the actual path of employment growth. So I said that I would slow down on slide 10. It's actually slide 56. It was 10 on my deck. So I'm just going to take a minute to describe how I do this. Basically, the idea is you have a macro model that says, what does industry employment look like in Berrien County over the next 5 years, over the next 6 years, whatever your projection period. And if I have industry employment, and I also know what the share of occupations are in each industry, say this year or most recent data is 2022, then if I know those shares in 2022, and I go to the state projections, which are wonderful, and they have industry occupation share projections. So I'm going to use those. So I know from those projections what the share of occupations in each industry will look like in 2027. Then think of those two ingredients. I've got industry employment in 2027, and I have the share of each occupation by industry. Simple multiplication. I map them out, and then I have occupational employment in each industry in 2027, and I add them up across the occupations. And it's fairly simple, but in some sense, why hasn't it been done? And I think part of the reason is most people use occupational employment at the MSA level, the metropolitan statistical area level. And the problem with those data, again, I love those data. I used to run that program. There's a lot of suppressions. There's a lot of confidentiality suppressions. There's a lot of holes. By using industry employment where you have hardly any suppressions, and then using occupational shares, that's the magic sauce. From those two, I can get you occupational employment. And then I can add up the employment across the industries to get each occupation in Berrien County. Again, what I should have said is these are industry employment for Berrien, okay? And then I can't read the gray because I'm blind. Develop criteria for identifying good paying in demand. So that's where I'm going with the rest of the talk. I'm hoping that I'm still within the time frame that you're giving me. This is the education. There is data out there at the national and state level that says, what's the education and training needed to enter an occupation? So I'm going to show you the results based on that. That's really important criteria because we want good jobs for those that don't necessarily get a BA. High demand. All I'm doing here is saying, and again, I welcome your criticism, your feedback. Berrien County's projected employment is 2.7% over the next 5 years. So I'm going to say high demand will be anything that's greater than 2.7. I can use any number, but I'm using 2.7 as my litmus test. And then for good paying, I'm using $20 an hour, which at full-time, full year translates into 41,600. I justify all those bullets there in terms of what its relationship to things like a living wage, the minimum wage, the poverty level, which I know is a family concept. But basically, I'm saying it's in the sweet spot, especially if you look at the last bullet. It's just below the median hourly wages for the nation and just above the 1887 median for Berrien County. So I think it's right in that kind of sweet spot for good paying. And then an innovation is, and I should rest on this slide for about an hour because it took a long time to get this done, but we are estimating job openings, annual job openings for each occupation. Those exist at the national level and at the state level. And I know that the state LMI office will do it for the prosperity regions, but it doesn't exist. We created a model to do it for Berrien County, okay? All right, I'm gonna show you 2 slides on what we call major occupations. And then I'm not gonna do a reading the slides, but I'll show you the kinds of results that we hope to put on our website. And I will happily share with everyone here on detailed occupations, okay? So these are major occupations, and you see where it says like 11,000. These are all the occupations that fall under management, okay? And so that's just the median earnings for all those occupations, the 2022 and 2027 employment levels, the projected, the changes both in level and percent, and then the annual job openings. And so you can see, for example, computer and math occupations has median earnings of 73,000, and it's projected to grow over 10% over the next 5 years. So then what you really want, though, to provide guidance is what's going on with detailed occupations. What do you say to somebody? And I love that slide, the Corbell slide, the nurse slide with all the different occupations, because in some ways you want to be able to group those. So you might have 6 or 7 detailed occupations that you look at holistically. So to do that, I do it by color coding. And this is computer and math occupations. In green, the green ones are good paying and in demand. And in yellow, they're in demand. We don't have any yellow ones here. And blue are just good paying. even though something may not be in demand, it may be something folks are interested in being trained in. It's good paying, and there will be opportunities. There are job openings. So I think part of the advice that we want to give is, what are the ones that will be good paying and in demand, but what are the ones that are good paying as well, that have a pathway to the future, not just over the next 5 years, but maybe over their lifetime of earnings. So this is computer and math. Again, I won't do a reading of the occupations, but you can see the kinds of information we're hoping to provide. We have healthcare practitioners and technical occupations. Again, a lot of in demand and good paying. Healthcare support occupations. Oh, and I apologize. Take a look at the far right. I'm listing the educational attainment that is needed to enter the occupation, according to both the state and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And then you can see healthcare support. And I also list the ones in white that don't fall into those categories, to give you a complete list underneath that major occupation. Construction and extraction, and you can see a lot are high school, but many are really good paying as well. And then installation, maintenance, and repair. So there's other major occupations. I'm just giving you a sort of a sample. But what you would have then, if you're providing advice to a job seeker, is this is what the projections tell you. And then you use your own knowledge of what's going on in the Berrien County labor market, job openings, the training kinds of provisions that are out there at the community college level, to really provide a hopefully good, useful career advice to those that are looking for a career. And I hope I was in my time frame, and that's it. Thank you.
So a lot of data. We have several microphones. Questions, if there's any questions from Mike. And I'm certain that after the next presentation, there may be questions related to Mike's presentation as well as Dr. Hopstock's presentation. But please, if there are questions, let's take a moment if we could.
Well, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. Dr. Hopstock.
So I have 4.5 minutes to do what we normally planned on doing in 10. Let me just put in your head the word opportunity. As I go through what I'm going to talk about, skipping across the top of the water, it's about opportunity. Berrien Reese's mission is to optimize student outcomes through collaboration and transformation. Collaboration is we do it together. Transformation is new and different ways of thinking. So I have a number of slides. Some are going to be don't blink because we're going to go right past them. But I do want to get a couple key concepts in. Labor supply chain. We have just about every business in our area has openings and needs. And then we started looking at students. So I'm going to talk to you about Berrien Talent Collaborative. It is the K-12, it is the universities, it is businesses, it is chambers in Berrien County coming together to expand opportunities for students and opportunities for businesses. So just stick with me for a while. This is our data from the K-12 world. 40% of our students enroll in college within 6 months. Don't gasp. This is about what it is across the state. Varies by individual district, but when you start aggregating the data, it's no different in Ohio, it's no different in Indiana. And of those, you'll see it's only 32%. So we lose a student in essence that does not complete a year. They come back. So what's happening with 6 or 7 of our students? I don't know where they're going. So we have a vast majority of our students that are looking for opportunities. And here's a breakdown by race, just so you can see what our most recent data is. I'm not going to focus on those. Guess what? Most of our kids go to Michigan colleges by and large, 2/3 go. Want to highlight a couple slides. This one in particular, we track, and we've known this forever. 10 students get on a bus. 2 will drop out before they graduate. We're working hard, but I will say this, we have more kids graduate from high school than ever before in our country. Is 2 dropping out not acceptable? That's not acceptable, but it's still the highest graduation rate from high school that we've ever had. 2 will not enroll in college. 3 will leave college without any credentials. And we have about 3 that will complete a bachelor's and associates, a doctoral degree. But 7 of the careers out there need credentials, not necessarily degrees. And so hold on to that thought. This is just to say that in Berrien County, we're at some of the highest levels of job vacancies that we've been in quite some time. Here's where I want you to start thinking differently. In the state of Michigan, we have something called career technical education. In most counties, they have what are called career tech centers. They are trade schools by and large. That is a badge of great honor in most counties in the K-12 world. We do not have one in Berrien County. What we do have is a collaborative network of career and technical sites by various school districts, Lakeshore, Brandywine, Niles. It has been a collaborative way to move along those career and technical skills. And everybody always hammers on me, when are we going to build a tech center? When are we going to build a tech center? We tried a number of years ago, turned down, tried again, turned down. I'm here to tell you a tech center is so much 50 years ago. What? There is a different way, and I can go through these, but I really want to get to, if you look at the regional maps we participate in, these are where tech centers are, 67 programs, but I want to talk about registered apprenticeships. Registered apprenticeships are a way to get juniors and seniors in high school into the job market, working at job sites without the use of a trade school. One of the things, if you run trade schools, you know how much plasma cutters are? Do you know how much businesses have to add those pieces of equipment because their job and their livelihood depend on being up to date? We need students as close to that environment as possible, making the wage and also learning the skills that lead to industry credentials. So what is an apprenticeship? An apprenticeship is an industry-driven education program that allows people to receive practical training and earn income while they do it. I'll let you read that out. We are working with K-12 education, with the universities to really develop and flush out registered apprenticeships. In other words, CTE, career technical education, isn't going anywhere. It is a necessary but insufficient path to the workforce. In other words, how do we do all that training, but then put students in those work-based environments so they are getting a wage and they tend to stick? I could shoot statistics at you all over the place, but universities since the pandemic started have seen a drop in enrollment. That's just where it is. Registered apprenticeships, on the other hand, have seen a 2/3 increase. In the United States, we have a little over 380,000 types of registered apprenticeships. Germany has 7 million. We got a ways to go. In other words, it is about opportunities. The other thing that I would have you look at, takes a little longer to complete an apprenticeship. It has lower cost overall, but it leads to greater options. And for most of us in this room, myself included, we do not think of apprentice to degree. I cannot think of a job that is not eligible to be an apprentice. Everything that was on John's list is open to become an apprentice. In other words, you start an apprentice, you let your employer pay. It is not that you are not getting a degree. It is a different opportunity or pathway to get to that same degree. And apprentices tend to stay in the communities in which they started the job at a much higher rate than students that come into our university environment in Michigan and then leave because they have greater opportunities. So I'm just introducing you to this concept of working together to blow out the wall on registered apprenticeships. We have about 1,800 seniors that graduate like clockwork in Berrien County. If you had juniors, that's 3,600 potential employees. We're not going to keep them all. Some are going to go off to college and then they're going to springboard to other parts of the country because that's where job opportunities are. Great. That has always been how it is. But how do we take those 6 or 7? And if we just kept 40% of them, Do you see the multiplication factor in terms of growing what Hillary just said? How do we keep students here? So I'm just introducing you to that concept of the Berrien Talent Collaborative. And how do we take that job market, labor supply issue? How does the educational world say, how do we think about things a little bit differently? Take existing structures and say, I don't think we need a tech center. One of the things I just want to illustrate the collaboration. Lake Michigan College had the Bertrand campus, Crossing campus. They were, if you look at the last 10 years, by and large, 95% of the students that were rolling through there were high school students. We as Berrien Reese inherited that building in September 1st. We now are going to pair that building with a Hanson Tech Center, which remains on campus, to say, how do we begin using those as training sites to roll kids from the south part of the county? So the infrastructure is already there. I don't need to build a tech center. We have space for businesses to begin training students in Berrien County. We have a southern site and northern site, and it is about working collaboratively in ways that I can't even fully imagine, but through hard work will become reality over the next few years. So benefits, you can read those very quickly, and I'm trying not to chew too much more time away than I already have taken. So just an example of how you can take K-12 world to begin to answer some of these needs within the business sector, but then also plug students here, and it gives them opportunity. Remember, 6 or 7 out of those 10 students are not going to college now. So I'm not competing with universities, not trying to take their bread and butter away, but I'm about giving opportunities for kids in Berrien County, and meaningful opportunities at that.
How many organized apprenticeship programs do you think we have in Berrien County today?
We have a number of businesses that are in, Todd probably answers this question faster than I do, but we have a number of businesses that are taking high school graduates and are working with them in registered apprenticeship programs now. And I can think of engineers are a good example of, we have a couple manufacturers that will tell me to my face, I'd rather get them out of high school and develop them into the engineers that I would want them to be, rather than sending them to U of M or Michigan State or some other place.
Any
like
idea?
that.
20, 50, 100, any idea?
Yeah, we have at the college right now, we probably have close to 50 companies participating in apprenticeships, and there's probably different trades, probably 12 to 15 different trades.
How many total kids?
Probably 150.
Okay.
So we're not taking something that's a brand new idea. It's how do you take an existing idea and just blow the wall out and really have every kid have that opportunity?
To that point, Jeff, we are working with the college to request the approval of additional. So we've got more companies coming in that are interested. We've got the college that's saying you can add more programming, and we know that you can only have a fifth. There's probably about 500 kids at our college that's got some form of apprenticeship program. So that's done the up.
Since I'm an honorary member now, I feel like I can ask a question. So one of the things that our higher ed and our pre-K-12 work group talked about was getting more sort of workforce into schools. And what I've heard from superintendents across the state is that, listen, I have some 11th and 12th graders, just like you said, who just want to start working now. And so if I don't let them, they will drop out, or they'll leave, or they'll get into something else. You know what I mean? So a real interest in something like what you're describing. What I've heard also though, is that, you know, historic kind of restrictions, like classes have to be exactly 55 minutes. Can I give credits? Can I, you know, that those things are real barriers. Are you running into those structural challenges? And when you look ahead, what do you need in that regard?
What is interesting about the credit is, if the career technical education for a decade has really worked on a number of what we call crosswalks. In the crosswalks, if you are putting a roof on and you are figuring, is this a 612 pitch? That's algebra. And so there are a number of ways for a student to earn on the job credit, if you will, toward their Michigan merit curriculum. And so people always ask the particulars. Well, in this job, you may be, okay, you're going to be out of the classroom, out of our building 3 days a week. But you got to come back 2 days a week because we got to fill in the details. Now, in another job, it may be 4 days a week. And so that's why the opportunities are going to vary based on the individual job opportunity, but you are meaningfully working. And that's, people are like, well, we have to figure that out. A lot of that's already been figured out. It's just not been applied to the issue. And so there are pamphlets, there are binders just sitting there of all this crosswork that has been done over the last decade. It's just been rarely applied. All right.
We'll give you another round of applause. So Michael Horgan's presentation on the data surrounding Berrien County's projections for jobs, et cetera. How does that fit to the work that we're doing right now here with the Talent Collaborative and all of the different interest groups and folks that are engaged in this conversation?
How it fits is there's a fair amount of information out there, but we already know where the sectors are that we need to be. There's manufacturing, there is, because we have a high service industry, there's government, and there's healthcare. Those are the areas we already know that there are good paying, high quality jobs that are there. So it is about approaching those industries. And I don't know how many industry conversations I have had. It's 50. I haven't had an industry yet that in an in-depth, let's sit down, let's have lunch, that has not said, that's a good idea. And really, I'm going to be honest, the idea, and I'm the one that was like, I never thought of apprenticeships for a degree. And just so you know, as an educator, we are one of the founding ISDs for the Talent Together Registered Teacher Apprenticeship. We have 900 teachers that started a registered apprenticeship. So I could look at you and say, I put my money where my mouth is, and we have worked out all the details, and we have 900 teachers over the next 2 to 3 years that are going to come into the profession. It's the single largest infusion of teachers in a registered apprenticeship program in the country. So it's a lot of work, but how do we do that over and over and over again so that every business here can begin to have students coming into the pipeline? Yeah. Some of them may be on the path to also becoming BA level, whatever, but you start through the registered apprenticeship, and if you look at colleges lately, they're sort of expensive. I'd rather have somebody else pay for it.
The only thing I'd add is we're doing a project right now for the state where they're redoing the basic funding mechanism. So we're doing a study for them that calculates the index of demand for CTE courses that are related to growing occupations. So it's taking the stuff I talked about with that crosswalk that you mentioned, saying what are the CTE courses that are being greatest demand throughout the state.
One other thing, this is just a shout out to Lake Michigan College. They're even realizing that the typical 16, 12-week credits, maybe they have to be 8 weeks at a time, maybe it's a 4 week at a time, so that they're rethinking. And universities really are beginning to grab hold of this to say, wait a minute, if we rethink how we're doing this, not only we're going to get the additional students coming in, but that is additional students I didn't currently get. So just restructuring how we look at credit bearing at the college level is really going to open up opportunities for kids as well.
Are we giving a hand now? Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Eric. One of the, I think, unique things of what we've heard so far today is the interconnectedness of all the different phases of work that we're doing in the room within the lanes that each of us has as a responsibility, but the interconnectedness is obvious and clear. And the kind of collaboration that's happening on this particular topic, I think, is really unique. Trying to then have Upjohn Institute and Mike and Lee and the folks there to help to actually thread those pieces together so that it is not in a vacuum that we're making the decisions on apprenticeships, that in fact, we're working collaboratively with a data set that makes sense. And as we heard also, housing is a huge part of that. I know that Pam Klyn wanted to make sure that there was a bit of an update as to what was happening with the Emma J. Hull Flats and some of the work that's happening in that arena. And then we hear what has happened post-pandemic in Housing 2.0 when John Eaglehoff comes up. So please welcome Pam Klyn.
All right, good morning, everyone. I always have to adjust it down. Selfishly a little bit, but really to remind everyone that, you know, building on the great work that Corwell has done in building housing, seeing the need for their employees. Whirlpool's done something similar, but I don't think either one of us want to be in the business of housing development. So this project was done truly as a catalyst to show if you build it, they will come. So I asked John for the opportunity to talk a couple minutes about what we have done here in partnership with Cornerstone Alliance, City of Benton Harbor, and many other partners. But if you haven't had a chance to see it, the Emma Jean Hall flats really are quite stunning. So please take a drive by, and hopefully we'll get a chance to give a tour at some point. We have built 80 market rate residential units, and the market rate is really important. This is all about building a tax base in Benton Harbor and putting individuals there who will become part of that community in a completely different way. But I will tell you that rooftop, super nice, and it rivals anything you would see in Chicago or New York City. So very proud of that. But again, the purpose of the project, adding about 100 permanent residents to the city of Benton Harbor and up to $100,000 a year to the tax base. This will bring an additional, up to 300 or 3.5 million of discretionary spending to the local community as well. So a lot of benefits coming with this, and I think it's really important to keep that in mind. The other element we introduced is a percentage of these apartments were held for what we call hometown heroes. So these are policemen, firemen, school teachers, etc., who are living in this apartment community alongside Whirlpool workers, for example, or other professionals within the community. We are subsidizing the rent there, assuming, or once they have passed the necessary qualifications. But what's really exciting about this to me is creating that community within a community. And there will be a number of activities that are facilitated within that group. But again, these are permanent residents of Benton Harbor. We get asked all the time if someone could live there part-time. No, absolutely not. We need it for the tax base. In addition to that, we're also introducing a community rewards program. So partnering with local businesses to make sure those residents who live there are going to our local businesses and becoming patrons of those. We are currently at 85% full after only 4 months of being open, which is pretty impressive, I will tell you. All the 2 bedrooms are full, and we continue to get new applicants. So we're really excited about how they have filled up. And again, kind of proving if you build it, they will come. There are a number of important elements that I don't have time to get into here, but there's been a lot of thoughtfulness put into this building, and it really does serve as a dedication to many of the prior residents and really leaders within the Benton Harbor community that have come before all of us. So with that, there is a short video here, and Susan, I just keep clicking, right? Okay.
When I was the mayor and I went out to find out what the people really wanted, they said they wanted housing and places to live, good places, nice places to live.
This is an economic engine starter, not only for a housing revolution, but for economic development on 625 acres of riverfront property. The property sat vacant for 33 years. No tax dollars, no curb appeal, nothing to attract people to the downtown area. And what this building does, $25 million investment, 80 units, which will have people occupying this space in place.
It was really important for us to be able to bring the history and traditions of the city of Benton Harbor into the Emma Jean Hall Flats development project. We did so by putting together a committee that was comprised of elected officials, community residents, and stakeholders that really had a firsthand experience and insight on who those leaders had been and the role that they played in the foundation of our community. Once we identified the historical and influential leaders for the building, the next step was then identifying the common areas and the spaces that we wanted to name after each one of them.
The connection to the city isn't going to stop with the dedication and with the naming of the common areas. We're going to have a number of programs that we roll out for the residents that encourage them to get involved in their community, to do volunteer work, to go and dine at local businesses. And it's more than just a place to live. It's open to everybody, not just Whirlpool employees, but we're going to do very kind of intentional and purposeful things to make sure that these 100 new residents that move in, that they truly become part of Benton Harbor and can impact the city in a positive way, just like all the people that we've honored in the building have done.
I'm ecstatic. I'm loving what I am seeing, because in the beginning I had my doubts, you know, but as we were brainstorming and giving these ideas and stuff, I'm actually amazed that Stephanie was listening. She was actually listening, and Mr. Whirlpool, he meant what he said. And I'm just hoping that we can work together moving forward, even more so closer together. That's my prayer.
And just a couple of photos from the ribbon cutting in late June. So really this serves just a fraction of the housing need that we have here, but just wanted to give a few highlights of what we've seen with what we've done. And I know Lauren can give similar examples as well. So with that, I will turn it over to John. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to continue talking about housing. This is a sort of refresher for some, an introduction to others on where we are with the approach to housing and understanding specifically what problems are out there, what the data says the issues we face are, and then sort of responding to the data, then providing solutions and looking out in the world to say, how are those solutions being executed out beyond us? So let me introduce you to our approach. I'm going to start with a refresher on where we've come from with the initial housing study that housing tool that we built back in 2020. So it involves a data-driven effort. We looked at specific data that we could trust, data that refreshes consistently, but we also listened to experts. So we didn't just simply ensconce ourselves in our ivory tower and, dig up data. We were listening. We also, as I said, we intended to have that data be refreshed as it became available. So who is using the tool? So what we're talking about here is we had a 1.0 version of this work. It is online and available for anyone to access. We've for this project, we've steered away from the idea of generating some sort of hard copy PDF and really have it universally available online. So who's using it? Well, the Best Practices Committee as a regular user, other local officials and municipal staff. We've seen some zoning adjustments as a result. Realtors and developers have access and we know they've tapped into it. School districts, tribal operations, and Corewell folks through their community grand rounds. So now the 2.0 version, most data points have been updated. We've added other points of data that we hadn't previously used. We are improving the calc. We listened, one of the issues that showed up in the 1.0 version was a concern about affordable housing, the housing that's really down at the bottom end of the spectrum. What are we considering affordable? And how is it? We had a flat 30% rate that we said, if you are spending more than 30%, then you are going beyond the sort of benchmark for what affordability looks like. We heard otherwise, that for some who are at the bottom end of the earnings spectrum, that 30% is even not realistic. So we have adjusted our approach in the this second version of the tool to respond to that. It's also an improved appearance and a little bit easier to use.
the timeline. Let's talk about how we've proceeded through this process. We thought it was very important to touch base with the committee within the SLC who was focusing on housing. So we built in several points along the way where we would say, here's where we are. Are we getting it right? Give us something back here to let us know where the gaps are and how we should fill them. If we are getting it right, let us know that too. So we had a meeting in July, talked through the presentation on the data that we'd collected. So that was our first point where we had done a big new data dump, and presented kind of the topics that we had covered. Then our next meeting was in September, where we talked through the problem statements that we built out of that data. And started talking through, how we can kind of reconcile those problems. Let's see, we seem to have spilled over a little bit there, but the second piece of that September meeting was then talking through solutions as well. So the problem solution kind of give and take, we had that conversation with the committee, and that was really useful and important for us. We intend for this new tool to be available for the SLC to load up on their site by November 3. So we're just a few days away from having that completed. The data, those of you who are wonky enough to want to know where the data comes from, it is, we take a large chunk of the US Census, the American Community Survey data that's available to us, but there are plenty of other state and federal sources that we're tapping. And then on the qualitative side, we're really thinking about what the community leaders have told us and the kind of input that has gone through the lifetime of these two projects now. And we're continuing to use that to help refine where they're headed. So this is an incredibly important piece of it. It's a conversation that we're having. And it is really the basis behind the idea that we're pursuing here, which is not, let's do a housing study and let's have it sort of embedded in time. No, let's engage in a process that says, we know conditions are going to change over time. Let's stay on top of that. Let's keep listening, and let's give folks who are in this marketplace, in this sector, what they need to respond to those issues that are constantly evolving. We also thought it was important enough within the problem statements to define where they came from. So not just to say there's a problem, but to say, here's the problem, and here's the source that told us that it was a problem. Okay, so now we're getting into really what the findings look like. We've refined our approach to supply and demand and understanding housing shortage calculations. Here's more specifics about how we're approaching that 30% sort of benchmark that I talked about before. For cost-burdened households, we are utilizing a 20% kind of benchmark, and understanding that relative to the ALICE survival budget, that 20% is vital because there are plenty of other expenses that are consuming large pieces of people's budget in that category. So we have to acknowledge that. We calculated the labor force population participation rate in Berrien County, determined that future growth at various incomes with the region's projections, and then match that up with housing stock. We noticed, I suppose the bottom line I should have mentioned is there's a shortage of housing across every price point. So these cohorts that we built relative to earnings cohorts in the census, we then looked at supply demand, and we are seeing that there is a discernible deficit in supply across all cohorts. Yes, okay, so a note on lower income. The number of units needed for low-income households represents not only a need for additional units, but also for increased housing assistance. So that gets dealt with farther into the work where we're talking specifically about what kind of assistance would be valuable. Just one piece of this, the cohort that resides between the households earning between $50,000 and $100,000 a year,
2,900 units appear to be what we're missing in that piece. And so this is an example of how we kind of have represented this data. We've got the annual household income and then blocked in, the housing units that are below the supply, the necessary supply. But this is a good reminder too that we aren't just thinking about purchase here. We're talking about rentals as well. So we've got a rental and purchase both included in the tool. And there are some assumptions that the bottom of this slide also includes. When this does go up and online, there's a couple of, I'm just going to show a couple of elements of it, so it's not completely unfamiliar. It's very easily navigable, or at least that's what we hope. And the nice thing about having it online, we use something called Story Map, which is you can engage the data in the way that you'd like. So if you find a piece of data or a piece of geography you're especially interested in, the tool will allow you to drill down in as you please. So it is not a static kind of piece of online information. It's very dimensioned and it responds to your interests. Yes. Sure, Rob. Uh-huh.
Sorry, I've just been thinking about this here. So if we go to the last column, the estimated single family home price, and I've had conversations with a number of you in this room, and sorry.
It's okay.
Rob, the question and answer period hasn't even started.
Sorry. Yeah, no kidding. Sorry, I interrupted you.
I'm no
cutting into
idea
our
what to
break
do.
time. Sorry.
So I want to go to the last column, the estimated home price. There is no home being built in this community for less than $350,000. Maybe one or two or three, or right. So I'm looking at it saying, how in the world are we going to supply single family homes for people making less than $100,000?
Right. So this is your question of me, how I'm going to answer this.
No, I'm not necessarily looking for an answer, but it's something we talk about all the time too, right? And Todd and I have had this conversation about, there's communities in Colorado, I think it was Steamboat Springs, that really had to have a hard conversation about the American dream with the public, right? The American dream is a single family home ownership, and how that's just, you don't want to tell people it's not attainable because it is, but the bottom line is there's not a lot of homes in this community being built for less than $350,000. So
Understood.
how in the world are we going to get there?
Oh, you're doing a nice job, I think, of setting up the situation we're in.
Lincoln with a Michigan temporary tag parked at administration parking, your vehicle needs to be moved immediately. Once again, the owner of a white Lincoln with a Michigan temporary tag parked in administration parking, your vehicle moved immediately.
This is the wrong time to get up and go to the restroom, by the way. Whoever is going to do that. No, but Rob makes a great point. I think because it does beg the very reason for this study is, first of all, do we need to think about income as much as we are about housing stock? Are these wages that are realistic for people to even, have a living wage? So that is part of this conversation, but the other is we have been building ourselves into a problem, and it isn't necessarily the problem that the builders are creating, it's the marketplace itself. How does a builder build a house that they make a profit on? And so part of the problem set that we've built is, how can we build houses that realize people's American dream who make less, who can not afford a $350,000 house? So the answers are embedded in the work. It is part of the problem statements that are that grow out of this. Rob, I mean, I think I'm not going to give you the golden kind of let's unpack this and then, oh, here it is for you. That's what you haven't been doing. There you go. The answer is we need to figure out how to align assets within our housing sector. And
We also need to unpack some housing archetypes that we haven't previously used, that sometimes get used elsewhere successfully. It is sometimes a zoning issue. It could be a density issue, meaning that our paradigms that we have grown to accept in this region need to change. And we need to be ready to accept that change if we want to solve these problems. Shall I move on? Got it. Oops, how did that happen? Oh, all right. Okay, so then we have some graphics here too, and what you'll be able to do here is you'll be able to see trends, and these are trends in the way household income has trended over the last several years, and the proportion of that income that's consumed by housing. And these are some of those graphics that you'll be able to drill down into when you open up the study or the tool. We know that housing costs are on the rise, and this is another example of how we have taken both mortgages and rentals and shown the way that those cost dynamics have changed over time. And also a kind of an acknowledgement of the fact that we need to be aware of the fact that there's a housing continuum that everyone can potentially be on. And this housing continuum shows, you know, a lot of us have experienced a very kind of satisfactory elevation through the housing, just different strata of housing. It doesn't always work that way for everyone. And sometimes health issues will cause people to bounce back into a different place in the housing spectrum. This continuum gives some example of, let's not forget that people experience all kinds of life's complications that might have ripples through the housing continuum. Key findings, they are entirely too small to read, but let's suffice it to say that this is just one small example of the problem statements. This is this set that's under supply. But we have a bunch of other categories of problem statements that we have the problems and then the solution options and how you could actually implement those solutions. So again, check the website, November 3rd, if we're successful. I mean, just kind of doing the whole techno thing that gets it onto the site. It's a simple link and it'll transfer you right over into that story map and off you go. John, questions and answers, right? Or are we good with time? We could do that?
We're fine. Yeah.
All right.
Rob took all the time that was available for a break, so no, I'm kidding.
Yes, and I gave a totally unsatisfactory answer, I'm sure. Sir.
John, are you guys looking at, because I keep hearing new build, but are you looking at the percentage of rehabable remodel homes? And
Yes.
then what is that average cost of a new build versus an average cost of just a home that's been remodeled?
The first part of that question is an unequivocal yes. What we've also done is recognize that among the existing units that need rehab, some are beyond what the market will bear. In other words, they are in uninhabitable condition, and to get them to a condition where they are habitable is too expensive for what that would then rent for or sell for. So we take those completely out of the equation. If the marketplace changes, great, maybe they'll be back in and viable. But so there's a piece of those that don't even relate. So I'm giving you that detail to let you know that we have done a fairly deep dive into this question and the answer to it. So that's a yes. Let's see, the other half of the question, I think I was a little less ready to give you an unequivocal answer to, but remind me what it was?
Just the average cost of a new build.
Oh, yeah. Right. And I think some of the determining factors that go into the average cost of a rebuild versus a new construction and how we can change that dynamic. We've tried to explore ways to change the dynamic itself and not feel sort of stuck with the realities we presently have. So in order to move that into, yes, it's a plausible scenario to rehab that unit, make it affordable for you. The industry that supports that there are changes we can make within there to support that industry. So to make some of those things more possible. I hope that's the beginning of a satisfactory answer, but what you'll find in the tool is some good information on those topics. And we'll just, I hope that that's sufficient. Other questions?
All right, very good. 10-minute break, and we'll hear where there actually is some work being done right now on some of this housing question, and that's Project T coming up in just a few moments. So 10 minutes, take a restroom break. Restrooms right around the corner this way. So help yourselves, and obviously coffee, tea, water, and so forth. Look forward to seeing you back in just a few moments. All right, good morning again, folks. Why don't we go ahead and continue on the aggressive agenda if we could, please. We'll get back together. I think what we found amongst all of these different presentations is that the data itself helps to lead towards conversation. The conversation leads towards questions, which in some cases leads towards even more challenges, doesn't it? The beauty of that, though, is that if you can face those questions and challenges with a clear head and a clear understanding and at least some acceptance that the data is what it is, I think it gives us an opportunity to try to solve some problems. There are organizations all over our communities that are doing that work already, not the least of which is our next presentation right now. So as we finish our coffee break, I wanted to give just a couple of very brief updates from the SLC side of things. We are at one of the major funders of the Strategic Leadership Council right now with Corewell Health, and we thank Dr. Hamill and all of the associates and folks who support Corewell Health. They are a major portion of how we help to try to draw together all the disparate organizations and interests, all the local communities who participate in best practices and so forth. We also, of course, have Whirlpool Corporation as a significant contributor, a major contributor to the Strategic Leadership Council, again, with the idea being that together we can help to solve some of these sorts of issues and initiatives by gathering the best and the brightest of Berrien County into the room to make that happen from a data set. We also have lots of very individual contributors, local municipalities who participate. The idea behind the investor commitments is that participation spreads across all of Berrien County. And interestingly, and I know I'm not going to take too much of the thunder of our best practices committee, but we are seeing more and more engagement from Niles and the Niles community, which I think is important. It is, after all, our largest single municipality in Berrien County. So Rick Huff, the city administrator, is very engaged in the work that we're doing and is interested in being supportive and helpful too. So we appreciate that very much. That was all I had today. We could go on and on with other issues, but really the bulk of the matter that we're going to be talking about is how these disparate organizations can continue to come together to solve problems. So with that, I'd like to introduce a classmate of mine from Lake Michigan Catholic, by the way, Erin Hudson. I've known her for many, many years. I get the good benefit also of working in the same office space with Leslie and others at the consortium building in downtown Benton Harbor, where the strategic leadership offices are. So with that, please help me welcome from Harbor Habitat for Humanity, Erin Hudson.
Correction, I'm younger than John. We were in the building at the same time. Good morning, everyone. I'm here to introduce you to Project T. Let's see. First and foremost, Project T is not the name of the development. That is a code name that leaked. T stands for terrarium. The terrarium is a fully functioning micro ecosystem. Project T is going to be a community of diverse housing products for diverse individuals and families with diverse needs. There are going to be housing opportunities for mortgages, and there will be rental opportunities in apartments. This community is going to be a place where young professionals, senior citizens, veterans, and everyone in between can live, work, play, and most importantly, learn together. A true partnership between Harbor Habitat, our development partners, and the city of Benton Harbor. Oh, I went the wrong way. Oh, I did go the right way. To create this mixed place housing development, Harbor Habitat partnered with Renovare Development. Renovare is a social impact real estate development company. What attracted us to Renovare was the fact that they focus on transformational projects that serve a deep community need. This was a key component to the success of this development because we wanted partners who would be concerned about making a lasting and positive impact in the community and want to be a part of the community going forward. This development is going to be located at 960 Agard and 807 Weld Street. This is the location of Mercy Hospital, the previous location of Mercy Hospital. We will be developing over 5 acres of land. There will be 77 housing units with 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms for sale and for rent. One thing I've learned after 12 years of being with Harbor Habitat is that not everyone wants, nor is everyone ready for home ownership. Home ownership is not for the faint of heart, but they still deserve a safe, decent, affordable place to call home. The city of Benton Harbor recently approved the rezoning of the land to accommodate this project, and we're working on site plan approval as we speak. We plan to break ground in the spring of 2024. As you can see, we have a total of 19 duplexes. That's 38 units that will be for sale, single-family housing. They will reside along Union, Agard, what used to be Agard, and Weld Streets. We received a conditional missing middle grant award to help us build Phase A. I don't have a pointer, but Phase A is going to contain 15 of the duplexes. Oh, yay. Okay, thank you. Phase A will contain these 15 duplexes, and they will be targeted towards those making 60 to 120% of the area median income. To give you an idea, for those of you who don't deal in the AMI day to day, for a single person, on the low end, they would have to make at least $32,760 a year. And on the high end, they could make no more than $65,520 per year. Now, if it's a family of four, they would have to make on the low end $46,800 per year and no more than $93,600. Phase B will be the 4 duplexes. Whoops, push too many buttons. The 4 duplexes here on the end will be built by Harbor Habitat in the Harbor Habitat way, meaning we will work with volunteers. Now, we always use electricians and plumbers. Anything that requires a license will be built by those carrying those licenses. But everything that can be built by a volunteer will be built by a volunteer. We still want the community to be involved in this project. The Habitat homes will target those who make 30 to 80% of the area median income. So for a single person, they would have to make at least $16,380 per year. And on the high end, $43,680 per year. For a family of 4, they would need to make at least $23,400 and no more than $62,400 to reside in the Habitat homes. These homes are going to have the exact same look and feel as the rest of the development. They will be identical. They will just be built by volunteers. Phase C will reside along Empire, and that is the mixed use building. This is going to contain 12,500 square feet of commercial space on the ground floor. So far, we're in talks with Tri-County Head Start for childcare and education. We are working very hard to secure a grocery store. We would love to have a bank or a credit union, and it would be really nice to have a little diner or cafe where they can grab some coffee or a sandwich, but none of that has been confirmed. We're still working on those pieces. The top 3 floors will consist of apartments. There will be 39 apartments in the building. And we would like to target those who make 30 to 120% of the area median income. But as we have not secured funding yet for that building, we have to wait until we have a funding source, because the funding source will dictate the programming of that building and who we are allowed to serve. Through the partnership with Renovare, and just so that you understand what's happening here, Harbor Habitat is working as developer with Renovare. We have created an LLC. Harbor Habitat owns 51%, Renovare is 49%. By working with them, we will be able to provide much needed affordable housing in the city of Benton Harbor and put 38 new taxpayers on the tax rolls. This is the AMI chart that kind of gives you an idea. I did speak to you about the different targets for phase A and phase B, but this gives you the full chart so that you can see it increases when you add people to the household. I'll close by showing you the renderings of the development. These are the duplexes that will line Union, Agard, and Wells Streets. Aren't they beautiful? I feel like it's my baby. When I first saw these renderings, it really took my breath away because this started from a need. This is the mixed use building with the commercial space on the ground floor, and this will reside along Empire. It started with the need for affordable housing in the city of Benton Harbor. And it happened to coincide with the time that Habitat had run out of land. We had absolutely no lots left to build. So when the hospital was demolished, we were looking at that land and what we could do. We would have been working on that site for about 20, 25 years to do what partnering with Renovare is allowing us to do in about 3 years. So sitting in the Strategic Leadership Council meetings and listening to all of the information from the housing diagnostic tool, they just helped me to realize that us building 1 to 3 houses per year was woefully inadequate. The community has a need today. And in order to be a part of the solution, we had to partner to make it happen. When I look at this development, I think about a quote from Francis of Assisi. It says, "Start by doing what's necessary, then do what's possible, and suddenly you're doing the impossible." It's amazing what becomes possible when everyone comes to the table thinking, what can I do to make this happen? Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Any questions for Project T and Erin Hudson and Harbor Habitat for Humanity?
Yes.
What happens if someone's in a rental unit and has the good fortune of getting a raise that pushes them out of the range? Is it
No,
just the initial that they
it's
have to
just
meet?
the initial qualification to get in. We want them to get raises and promotions. We want them to make more money. We want them to increase their station in life. That's the whole Habitat model. This is a stepping stone to greater things. So there is no punishment. Maybe they will move into a house. Maybe they'll get a mortgage at that point.
Erin, a question if I could ask too. The mayor of New Buffalo is here. I won't speak for him. He's probably got his own series of great questions, but I know that other communities throughout Berrien County where you are actively participating and looking around and trying to find solutions.
Yes.
Other thoughts on other communities that Harbor Habitat may be looking to replicate, partner, continue working?
Absolutely. A few years back, prior to the pandemic, actually, Harbor Habitat secured permission from Habitat International to increase our geographic service area. We've built 117 houses in Benton Harbor and Benton Charter Township, but we receive calls every single month from all of the communities in Berrien County. So we extended our geographic service area to include 10 additional cities, townships, and villages in North County. The goal, of course, is one day to be Habitat of Berrien County, but that costs money, and building 1 to 3 houses a year was not getting us there. This is another tool that helps us to move in that direction. So we are able to build in St. Joe, Stevensville, Baroda, Bridgman, Berrien Springs, Eau Claire, Coloma, Waterville. I'm not going to be able to remember them all. But please call me and I can give you the list of where we are allowed to build. I have not announced it because I don't want to raise the hopes of people until we have land and can actually build in their community. So I am happy to announce that in the spring, we will be building 2 to 3 homes in Bridgman. I've been working with Juan Ganoum for years on this project, and it is finally coming to fruition. We hope to get the vote November 6th, a week from tonight. We hope to get the vote to be able to change the zoning and approve us to build on that site. So we will be building in Bridgman in the spring, if all goes well. What happened to my plant, Rob? Yes.
When will you actually have the units on the market so that people here can help spread the word about when people can go and buy a house?
We will be pre-selling the units. So look for it in 2024 for us to start doing that, because we will be working with a large construction contractor. Those 15 duplexes that they're building should be complete in 8 to 9 months. Harbor Habitat will start 2 in 2024 and another 2 in 2025. Ours will take a little longer, but there will be 15 ready by the end of next year. Yes.
So Eric, since John called me, I thought I should say something. But so first of all, congratulations on Project T.
Thank you.
Those who've been involved have been following this since Alex was first looking at it originally, well, a couple of years ago. So wonderful for you guys that that's actually back on track. But to comment on a recent meeting I was at about the United Way and the Alice numbers, particularly in my region in Buffalo. We were surprised, not surprised, to see that 30% of our entire residential population was at Alice or below. But really that 30%, that's 30% of our home stock, and 70% of our home stock is second homeowners or non-residents. So you could literally say that of our residential population, 100% of it is at Alice or below. So these types of developments are key to future growth in our communities. We're looking at a couple of small projects ourselves. I know the Buffalo Township as well. And appreciate your work, and I hope we get to talk about it more.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Erin. I appreciate it. So as we think about all of the big initiatives that we have, there was, I thought, a pretty important part of the conversation that Hillary had early on about the important and intentional use of time with the younger folks, right? 18 to 35, I think, is what she categorized it as, some of our younger folks who, if they're going to see Michigan grow in the future, they're going to be critical to that conversation. We at Strategic Leadership Council, on the shoulders of many different organizations in the past, of course, had the suggestion that we needed to pay attention to that same group from a leadership perspective. The Leadership Accelerator was that. Many of you are some of those leaders in the room who helped to build the Leadership Accelerator that it is today. And today, it is in fact an incredible partnership with Southwest Michigan Chamber and with Lake Michigan College. So to give us an update on the Leadership Accelerator and probably have a few asks of all of you as leaders in the room is Dr. Ken Flowers, Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs, I think is the right title. Okay, it was close. Please welcome Ken Flowers.
So yeah, as John said, one of the key pillars of Strategic Leadership Council is building the leaders of tomorrow. And so I've been blessed. I've been part of the Leadership Council since it started in 2015, along with, I've seen many of people in this room that's been part of it as well. And so basically, I'm just here to announce that we're kicking off the 2024 cohort. Sarah and Arthur and myself and Pam McVeigh at the college are leading that effort again this year, looking for a kickoff in the late January, which is January 25th. You'll start seeing some information coming out from that within the next couple of weeks. We're looking at application kickoff on November 6th. We're reviewing applicants. We're going to take, again, 30 applicants this year. And so again, it is a competitive process. We will be reviewing them. And I remember even last year, Dr. Hamill called me and it's like, hey, I have 6. Can I get 6? And I can take 3 right now. And so that's kind of where we're at. And as much as we'd love to take anyone and all of them, it is a competitive process. And so we'll be looking through that. So basically how that process starts is, again, we're going to be kicking it off, but really the Leadership Accelerator of what way we've developed it is we have the students take an assessment and then we build on that, those skills and those strengths that they know that they are, build that through the whole project. Okay. And so there's 13 weeks. And so we meet 13 times. One of the highlights is John Prose takes us to state capitol and they visit with the legislators during that time. And again, one of the things that they're able to see is how they interact with those legislators, what leadership means and what those different things, the different things that they're learning, how they impact from week to week. And so it's been a wonderful experience for all of us that have been a part of it. And we're just kind of looking to see, just letting you know that it's going to start happening soon and to be looking for it. So any questions? Originally last week when I was talking to Susan, when she asked me, she said in 5 to 10 minutes, I said, I can do it in 2. All right. And then she just told me I have 20. So any questions from the group?
The openings, yeah.
30 right now. Yeah. So there's 30 spots. So we've started with 30. We know we generally have some attrition based on people getting jobs, people moving on and doing different things. So each year we've graduated we've started with, 29, we've ended up with 25, so again, it is time. We're asking people to show up. It's one of those things, the expectation is that you're there every week or every other week when we're meeting. And so it's quite a commitment. And that's one of the things that we talked about last week is making sure that companies are aware of the commitment. Because we do it to really make a difference, you do have to be there every time we meet. Yes. Hi, Leslie.
Do you need to have an organization backing your nomination, or can people sign up on their own? And are there still scholarships that are available for folks?
So yes, so in terms of the nomination, no, people can sign up for their own. People have been nominating individuals, which is fine. But basically what we've done is opening up an opportunity for people to apply on their own. And yes, we do have some limited scholarships, but we do have some. And that's also something too, that we've had individuals call us that have scholarship other people. So we are open for that as well. Yes.
Along with that, how much is it for someone to attend these days?
Great question. It's $1,500. Yes. We haven't thought about that, just because it's not something that folks have asked for, but it's certainly we could review it to see how it could align with some of our classes, because they ultimately do spend 13 weeks, close to 75 hours or more, probably over that, doing that training, but we haven't really considered it, but it could be an opportunity for sure. I do want to give a plug for Eric and the apprenticeship model while I'm up here. I was an apprentice, and so I understand the impact. And so for me locally to start as a tool and die apprentice and work my way to certain positions, again, people talk about, hey, you don't need a university. To me, that's certainly true. But I think it does give you some great foundational skill sets. Most of our local shop owners and tool and die owners and owners of a lot of the local companies were former apprentices. And so they saw that next step. So there's lots of great opportunities. So as much as we can get behind that and support that, I think it's going to be better for our community and better for our region as a whole. So thank you.
All right, without further ado, John Eaglehoff changed into a new vest. So he's prepared and ready to talk about something that has happened very recently as it relates to harbor redevelopment. And you might recall that Strategic Leadership Council and some of its very first work in northern Berrien County, specifically focused on the harbor and what its advantages may look like in the future, how that might come together with the three communities who have a piece of that particular opportunity. So John has some exciting potential opportunities to discuss. And of course, we keep a quick eye on all of the other initiatives that we have also, but we can all wear many hats. So with that, John Eaglehoff again.
Am I bringing the vest back? I doubt it, right? I don't, this is not going to trigger some kind of vest thing, I suspect. I had an interesting experience at the gym the other day where a guy at the gym just pulled me aside and said, oh, he'd seen a YouTube video from a ways back about the harbor. What's going on with the harbor? Is that just kind of laying there? Is nothing happening? Oh, as a matter of fact, there is quite a bit happening. So I'll play like, you know, I'm giving that pitch again to him, to you all. But first, let's assume that not everybody knows where we've come from on the harbor. So a little update. In 2015, 2016, a very interesting harbor study was conducted. It was a sort of a group project that involved Andrews University's fantastic architecture program, which I think probably at least some of these people among us know how amazing it is. They did some incredible work. We worked with them building a kind of, at the Planning Commission, we built a foundation of regional information to underlie their exploration of what's possible in the harbor. That happened. Then we built something called the Harbor Conservancy, and we sort of walked through various issues in the harbor with that star chamber of folks from around the region to talk through possibilities in the harbor. There was a partnership with the Office of the Great Lakes, Eagle, soon after that, that involved a Michigan Sustainable Harbors Project is what it was called. And for that part, it was a separate project, but also really interesting kind of more granular work that was happening with the community, also kind of engaging with the harbor. So you can see the dates that some of those important events happened within that Sustainable Harbors Project. In January of 2020, presentations of the planning results for each jurisdiction, to each jurisdiction were made. Many of you realize there are 3 jurisdictions involved that intersect at the sort of front of the harbor, so that we need to make sure they're all coordinated if anything is to happen. And also Berrien County itself is very actively involved. So really 4 political jurisdictions wind up being very actively involved in harbor work. Oops. So, but back in time slightly, October to December 2019, we began this exploration of, okay, if we're going to collaborate on something transformational in the harbor, how does that look on the governmental side? What does that look like on the policy side when 3 jurisdictions try to coordinate their approach to harbor redevelopment? What legal options exist to create a separate thing among those 3 jurisdictions? So that began back in October, December of 2019. In October of 2019, that sort of conjunction of jurisdictions agreed to have a working group and investigate what was possible in terms of a governing body. And at Lake Michigan College back in 2020 in January, a special joint meeting of those 3 jurisdictions took place and a working group was formally created. That was a really interesting meeting because just putting the elected officials for 3 jurisdictions together in one meeting requires a whole bunch of, hoops that have to be jumped through, but it was successfully executed and happened on that date. The three jurisdictions endorsed the formation of a harbor coalition by formal motion. So July and August, the jurisdictions, were back in their own settings, making formal decisions about what to create. And so from that, then they all kind of set their attorneys loose on figuring out what an interlocal agreement would really look like and all the details of that. Okay, so that's the catching you up. And sorry that maybe that was a little not so fun to go through, but at least we're all on the same page now. Here's what's happening recently. So this is what I tell the guy at the gym. One, there was an opportunity through the U.S. Department of Commerce, Economic Development Administration, to solicit something called an economic development, a representative of an economic development corps. I'll give more detail about each of these. So, okay, so park that. The second opportunity has been something called a recompete grant, also with the U.S. Department of Commerce, Economic Development Administration. So I'll talk a little bit later on that. And then technical assistance through the Michigan Infrastructure Office. All three of these will get a little bit more detail. The Economic Recovery Corps. This is such an interesting possibility, but I want to tell you right off the bat, we got far in this process. There was some really nice inertia that started to build around this, but we were fighting nationally. 65 of these would have been assigned across the entire US, and we were in the mix for one of those 65. We didn't quite make it. So sorry about that, but I want you to know that these things are happening. So what that would have been was a fellow, an IEDC, International Economic Development, whatever, coalition or whatever they call themselves, certified economic development fellow would have been assigned to this project exclusively for 2.5 years at no cost to the communities. To be sort of that through line that would connect the efforts of the local jurisdictions, that joint body that the locals are going to ultimately build, and then would sort of pass over the day-to-day responsibility of executing on ideas to this fellow. So it sounded like a really cool idea. That person would have been housed in our office at the Planning Commission. We would have sort of overseen it to some extent, but anyway, it was a huge and a very interesting possibility. That would have been something on the order of about close to $250,000 in value that we would have had at no cost whatsoever to any of us. So we threw our hat in the ring. Some good folks like John were in there swinging away for us. We got close, but didn't quite get that. Now, we are very much in the mix of competition for these next two things. So here we go on that. Recompete grant. This is something that has connections to the IIJA, the big infrastructure, the federal infrastructure funding that is such a monster. And we want to, well, they're looking for regionally impactful projects at Recompete. And one of the interesting things about this Recompete grant is they have designated very specific geographies that are eligible. So you look at a map, and the map shows the entire county of Van Buren, Benton Harbor specifically, and then other little places like Vandalia and stuff. But so Benton Harbor was in the mix for this grant right off the bat. So we didn't have to compete nationally against anybody who would apply. The applicants were already specifically kind of identified as potential. So we thought, okay, we've got an entry point here. Let's have a go at this. So it's called a distressed area pilot program. And as I said, the only specific jurisdictions identified, and Benton Harbor was one. What we did was, there's two phases of this. Hang with me. There's a first phase that allows you to take the work that's been done in the harbor already and turn that into a very kind of detailed project. or a series of projects. So phase one says, we will help you develop what you've got into a project. And then phase two, where the real fireworks begin, look at the numbers on that. An average of $20 to $50 million per project awarded in phase two. So you get the phase one, you get $500,000 to build your strategy, and then you formally apply for phase two, and you're eligible for that kind of funding if you're successful. Obviously, the competition gets more intense as you go through. So I'm not trying to, I don't want to overstate this like it's in the bag. Anybody that stands up and talks about a grant that you've applied for as if it's in the bag, you know, a lot of skepticism. I get it. But the purpose of me being up here talking to you about this stuff is that things are happening still with the harbor. And this is an example. We put in a lot of effort to put in a competitive application for this grant. The third thing that's also in the mix is the Michigan Infrastructure Office offered up a very interesting opportunity to provide technical assistance to potential, again, regionally impactful projects. We thought the harbor was a great opportunity to go after this MIO funding. So what's happening is it's part of a locally driven process, really, let's say regionally driven process, where they gave the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission the opportunity to select 2 to 3 projects that would ultimately get lifted up to the state level for MIO to look at and say, do we want to fund these? And if MIO says yes, then a similar process of technical assistance where you solicit a consultant to help spec out the project, give it costs, would then make that project competitive for IIJ funding at the federal level. So this is this, it sounds a little confusing. Let me make it clear. The state, what they're trying to do here is cultivate highly potentially successful projects at the federal level that are Michigan projects. And they're so dedicated to that they will fund the effort of a consultant to build out that, spec out that project, create a viable application. And then there's $968,000 that's available for our region to be a match for the federal ask. Is that, I hope that's clear. If it's not clear, ask questions after I'm done. I'm almost finished. So this is a cool opportunity, and the Harbor Project was one of those that is in the mix to be potentially selected as one of the 2 to 3 regional projects that will bubble up to the MIO state level. Okay, good. Yeah, questions. So that's where we stand. 2 still really potential and interesting grant opportunities, and one that slipped through our fingers, but we had a good run at it. Yes, Jeff.
So John, I mean, these are potentially game changers. I mean, this was nice, but the one before that is a lot nicer. And it's real money. And my question is, are you getting all the support you need? Are we organized for success to go put the power of everybody we can behind this to make it a compelling proposition?
I love that question because it gets right to the point of why I participate in the Strategic Leadership Council, because you all, this is a lever to, if we pull this SLC lever at certain important moments, we can show a lot of regional support for things like this. So the answer is yes. A call to John and he calls to action and we get action. So we got a lot of letters of support for the grant application, the recompete opportunity. We got a lot of letters of support for that, which is great. But I will continue to try to pull the SLC lever on things like this when the opportunity arises. So I think we still have work to do as a group. to fully actualize that opportunity. But to me, that's why I sit in these meetings, because I think a collection of leaders like this, when the opportunity aligns with where you all think we should be, you pull that lever and then we can make magic happen.
When we didn't get the first grant that you mentioned, was there any debrief to understand where were we not as competitive that we might apply learnings to these other grants?
The best we could do, they didn't give us a formal debrief because I think when you're in this business of, we do this a lot at the Planning Commission. We look for opportunities. We have a lot of success because we choose our opportunities wisely. You could tell the ones that are really well organized and those that are a little slapdash. And this, that one, the partnership between EDA and IEDC was a little confusing, and they didn't wind up giving us that debrief that you're talking about, but we did it ourselves. So we pulled the projects that had succeeded onto the next level. And we're doing a kind of sort of look over at those projects. What do they have that we didn't? Yeah, so we're kind of doing it ourselves. Actually, that is still in process. They haven't selected where those fellows are going to go. So it's still a work in progress. So ultimately, the 65 that do get selected, that'll be the most interesting kind of information for us to finally get and understand. Yes.
You mentioned with the last one that there's a project. What exactly can you tell us about the project?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because so we talk about the harbor revitalization or it really isn't a project, right? I mean, it's been part of a study. The Sustainable Harbors thing was also useful because it gave us some more granularity. But the Mayo application is really I think that I might have to beg a little forgiveness on this one because I can't remember all 5 phases of what we specified in that project. But there was a lot of intentionality behind thinking about a zoning overlay district. Let's see, what else did we have in there? I guess I can't remember, but I do have those 5. And anyone else who's interested, please reach back out to me and I can give you the actual application. It would be no problem. But the bottom line is without giving you the detail on the 5, I can tell you that we did take what has been done for the harbor so far and specify we are trying to translate this into an infrastructure question, into a zoning question, into a marketing question. When everything is kind of assembled, we would like to have something that we can market to developers that will attract them to the harbor and have interest in that. So I think that was maybe 3 of the 5 elements. Yeah, so the bottom line is, can we build this out into a viable project that can turn heads when we apply for IIJA funding?
So you mentioned zoning, and this is a time where we're completing the community engagement for the Benton Harbor Master Plan and zoning ordinance updates. Are there recommendations that the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission would have for us in regard to the areas that we're talking about, so that they could possibly be incorporated in the final plan?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, we would start with the plans that have already been built and overlay those and say, what are these telling us when it comes to zoning? What can we do on the zoning side that will make these other things possible? And on the other side of it, what prohibitions might exist that would make them impossible. So you look at both sides of that, but to do it from the point of we have documentation already that we can call on, and it's really very kind of it's robust and useful. And let's build out of that into the two sides of that question.
Thank you.
I'm getting the hook.
The hook, yeah. Thank you, John. All right, a question for everybody. What was the first thing you did when you walked into the room this morning? You probably got a cup of coffee. You may have translated that into what's my Wi-Fi connectivity to make sure that should something blow up, I can jump online pretty quickly and manage it. If I have to step away, I can do that. That is the purpose of the next conversation. Commissioner Freeling is here, as is Terry Rubenthaler from Midwest Energy and Communications. An update that, as we all know from the pandemic, technological advancements require us to be engaged online and with access to Wi-Fi and ready services. So with that in mind, our county has taken a great dive into that. Our county administrator was here a little while ago, but he works, in fact, for, oh, he's right there. Pardon me. Everybody say hi to Brian. He does, in fact, however, work for Commissioner Freeling. So please welcome Commissioner Terry Freeling.
Good morning, everyone. Come on up, Terry. It is a great pleasure to be here in front of you all and to be able to give you a brief update on what we've been doing as it relates to broadband and the county's work, along with Terry and his team from Midwest Energy and Communications. And so hopefully I can navigate this okay. There is the first page. So this first one is just kind of to give you a brief overview of the timeline of the work that we've been doing on the broadband initiative. Last time I was here in front of the Strategic Leadership Council to do an update, we were working on getting an application put together for the state of Michigan's program called Robin through the My High office. MEC actually applied on behalf of Berrien County, as well as our neighboring counties, Cass and St. Joseph, through those funds. And in June, we heard that MEC was one of 11 applicants who were successful in the initial application process. So since February, when I came and spoke to you all and said, we're really working forward, trying to get this initiative done. And many of you in this room wrote letters of support. You have been at the table as we have been thinking through how we can make our application strong. The state saw that work and proceeded with giving us, through MEC, a grant. And there were almost $1.3 billion asked for in the applications. There were 154 applicants in that process. And so 18 of those projects were just announced Thursday afternoon. 18 of those projects and 9 of the applicants will be moving forward for final construction. And the application from MEC was one of those 9 applications. So I really think that that is such a great highlight of the success that you can do when we all come together and we can collaborate and work for the greater good. And so one of the things that I wanted to say with regards to the screenshot is it's a little stale because Wednesday, when I got this to Susan, Thursday, they came out with all new information with the final award. So you will see here that it says 24 projects and 11 applicants. That was the initial award. They went through it, vetted it more, and pulled out some of the applications. And then we landed with 9 total. And so I'm going to turn it over here to Terry to talk a little bit about their application, what's included within Berrien County for the application. And we'll just have him share all the awesome news. How's that sound? All right.
Yes, hello, everyone. And for those that have been waiting for internet, today's the day. It's in the bag, John. It's in the bag. The application was done in April and we finally got the announcement last week that we're going to be able to start construction and start building some of these rural folks that don't have very good service. And so to kick it off, I'll give those that don't know who we are a little background on Midwest Energy. So Midwest Energy is the rural electric provider in southern Michigan. We started business back in the late 30s when the large investor-owned utilities wouldn't bring electric out to the farmers, and we built it. And our model and our mission today is still the same. It's to bring services to rural folks, to keep rural communities vibrant, and to build it places where others won't. So we don't try to overbuild anybody. We don't try to go places where people already have good service. We're trying to get out in those rural communities where folks don't have good service for this necessary utility in our minds now. That's how we view it. It is a requirement, just like John said, it's the first thing we check. It's the first thing we got to have. And when you don't have it, it's pretty bad. So we about 10 years ago meet with our customers. We'd ask them how we're doing, and everybody came back to the same thing, that your electric service is fine. You guys are doing a good job, but if you don't do something about the internet, we're going to have to move. We cannot live here. We can't work. We can't go to school. We can't do anything. And so our board of directors took the initiative to figure out a way to get those services to our electric customers. And we made the determination to do it the right way. Let's do it the premium way. And we went 100% fiber to the home. We provide up to gigabit speeds, recently announced up to 5 gigabit speeds. And the nice thing about going with fiber to the home is that it is virtually unlimited on what we can do. So when the technology changes, the needs change, the infrastructure doesn't need to. It is, as far as we know, unlimited on what it can actually do. So we don't do any wireless, we don't do any cable, we do 100% fiber to the home, into the home. And 10 years ago, we started on it, and about 7 years later, we had all of our electric customers served. So if you get electric service from us, you can get high-speed broadband service also. But we always got the calls from everybody. We got the calls from Berrien County. We got the calls from other folks that said the same thing. Hey, we live in the rural areas too, and we can't get anything. Can you help us? And so we started taking a hard look at, is there a way that this business model can be expanded? We had the people that knew how to make it work now. We had a lot of the hardware and infrastructure and knowledge. So we said, sure, I think we can do that. And about that time, the FCC came out with what they called their RDOF program. It was a Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. Thank you very much. And anyway, when it came out, it was a reverse auction, very different than a traditional grant. So the FCC said, here's an area, we'll give you this much money to build it. And then we'd say, okay, we'll do it for that. And then somebody else would say the same thing, and we'd bid down until somebody finally gave up or until there was no money left. So we bid in that, we were successful, and we're currently building those areas now outside of our electric footprint, out into the rural areas, some in Berrien County. We build all around Eau Claire and through Bainbridge Township, and those areas are complete now, and those folks are getting service. We've got lots more areas of that to build. And then the Robin opportunity came along, and we started working with all the municipalities and all the communities, and decided that this is another great opportunity, almost a too good to pass up opportunity. And started with Berrien County and all the communities there, and we expanded into Van Buren County, Cass County, and a little bit of St. Joe County, Michigan. And so 33 different municipalities, townships, villages, counties contributed to it. A lot of the reason there's not good internet out there is because it's so expensive to build. And so we needed grant funds. We needed some way to offset the capital investments that it took. And we moved forward with that. We got a great application put together with a lot of community support. And we got about 50% funding from the Michigan High-Speed Internet Office. And that fund is all ARPA funds. So it's not the infrastructure funds that we're talking about for the harbor. It is ARPA funds, which is the original COVID relief fund. So they're still getting those monies out. And part of the problem was you only have so much time to spend it. So not only do you have to contribute significant amount of funds, you have only a certain amount of time to get it spent and in use, and then it's all reimbursed. So you spend the money and then you get paid back from the state and from the other partners. So today's the day we've been waiting for a long time, and we are ready to announce our construction schedule. I think is the next slide.
Yes, sir.
So for those who've been waiting, and don't worry about the colors on the map. This is a snip out of a much larger spreadsheet on how we're going to get this all done. But basically, we're going to up our construction plans from, we were originally building 400 miles a year. Recently, we've been doing 600 miles a year. With this new plan, we have to up that to around 1,000 miles of fiber build a year. So it's over 20 miles a week have to get built. We have a lot of people working on this project. The schedule was determined from our engineering folks, so don't blame me if you're last. Don't get mad if you're in next year's plan, but
Taker's not here, I don't think.
so I apologize for anyone, but we're starting in the Berrien Township area, south side of Niles, and we're making a clockwise sweep around the county to get all those folks hooked up. So it's a lot of miles and a lot of people. It's with the challenge process that you go through with the grants. There was about 800 folks removed from our original application. And we are working with the county to figure out how to get, because some of those still won't have good service. There was many reasons they removed them, but it's part of the process. But we're around 9,000 customers that do not have service will be able to get service in the next 2 years. So it's big. It's going to make a huge impact on the economics for the county. And we are very excited about getting started on this project. So I don't know if there was anything else on that slide, but here's a map of so all those blue dots.
Yeah. All of the blue dots that you see on this map represent the addresses that are going to receive service. And I mean, you can see where the gaps are. And if you want, it is an actual interactive map. You can go to the Berrien County's website through the BC BIT page, and you can click on that map. You can see if your address is included. You can type it in there. You can see if your friends or relatives are. I've been getting so many phone calls going, I'm not on that list. And I'm like, but you are served already. But they're really excited to see that this is happening. And I'm so excited to have Terry here with MEC because they've been great partners. They've been at the table having these conversations. And as you could see from the prior slide, the timeline is quick. And so in 2 years' time, we're going to have almost, what would you say, 90% of the county having access to internet. And it is the great equalizer, right? Because so much of what we do today is related to some sort of device, like you had highlighted, John. We come in, we make sure that we have access to Wi-Fi, we have access to the internet to be able to do our day-to-day tasks. And it's only going to get greater that we rely on that. And so by having this is going to be an opportunity to help Berrien County rise together. We're going to be working on the housing, we're going to be working on infrastructure, and it's just a great time to be here in Berrien County and working together. And each and every one of you here in this room today have been a part of that. And so I know that there's a couple of other slides. If you want, Terry, we can pop through. If you want to learn more, this is just a quick reference. Go to berriencounty.org. You can go to the community resource page. Under that, there's the broadband internet task force page, and that is where you can find all of the information. But also I'd like to encourage you to go to MEC's website. Do you know the websites?
So it's teammidwest.com, and it will be updated soon. It's probably not. We just found out like late last week. So we were waiting for the final announcement to come out before we update our website, but that should be in a couple weeks. Should be able to put your address in there and it'll pop up and say, congratulations, or it'll say, it'll give you what status is for your address. So
It's pretty cool.
whatever the next other option is.
And then I think the next page is just, so I'll open it up for any questions that you may have for myself or the other Terry. We're in force.
Yeah.
Terry and Terry.
John, Terry.
I know, right?
Yeah, I noticed there's a significant omission on your chart. Lincoln Township wasn't noted there. Can you tell us where we are with Lincoln Township?
Yeah, so some of the zones were not named by township. So Lincoln Township, I believe, is part of Baroda.
Yes.
So it's part of that project called Baroda. So the names of the zone is the name of where the active cabinet's going. So we could reach into Lincoln Township from different other townships. So anyway, they're much larger zones, but yes, once you put once we get our website up to date, it'll also tell you when we think you'll be connected. So.
All right, Terry, I think the second answer was congratulations, and then the other one was, sorry, you lose, you don't get internet access. Is that what it was? Is it like a gong, like gong?
No.
A big hand for Commissioner Freeling, Terry Rubenthaler. Come down this way. So excellent news on that with the work that's being done. And really that we ought to point very directly to our commissioners. Commissioner Harrison was here earlier, County Administrator Doucette, obviously Commissioner Freeling, who's kind of led that charge for the commission as a whole. But there was recognition a few years ago that there was opportunity to engage and to try to solve that problem that became really so obvious and relevant during the COVID pandemic and the lack of connectivity. So I look at a few of our educators in the room right now too, and I know you all are saying the same thing, that was a big hurdle to try to solve from an education perspective, was that connectivity. We're going to bump just a little bit. We're going to come back in just a few moments to government best practices. So forgive me, I'm going to bump right on over here. We're going to talk very briefly, but give some really great updates on what's happening. And then former best practices chair and city commissioner, then turned city mayor of St. Joseph, Mike Gary, will follow Pam's update as it relates to Friends of Berrien County Trails and an aggressive plan that's going to require all of us to work together. So with that, please welcome Pam Klyn.
Thank you again. I'm up here with some more good news and fun things to talk about. So I'm just going to spend my day here rather than go back to the office. But anyway, this is building on the great work that Gary, Mike, and Marcy have done with Friends of Berrien County Trails and really talking specifically about our Lakeview Trails on the Whirlpool campus. We do have this really is another catalyst for community connections. So we did this because we had amazing property to build it on, but also to create that connector from north to south. So there will be over 20 miles of trail total that we're able to connect to. We have 7 miles of trail on our Lakeview campus. And you can see on the bottom of the page, we're already looking ahead. We have set aside through the Whirlpool Foundation, $300,000 to start to fund a maintenance plan around this. And then another $400,000 for matching funds for the corridor project that will connect our Lakeview Trails on our campus to Higman Park Road and down in that area, and really help create a great corridor along M63. And I will tell you, I did not take a picture, but looking out from our global headquarters on Friday afternoon in the middle of a meeting was a gentleman pushing a stroller down the side of M63 right in front of our building. So if there was ever an advertisement for the need for this corridor along that, that was it. And then I just had to look away. But we did have a ribbon cutting in June of 2023 for phase 2 of our Lakeview Trails. So last fall, we opened the first 5 miles of trails. Phase 2 was the tunnel under the highway. Thank you for your patience as we had M63 closed for a little bit. But I think those who have used the trails would agree it was worth it. That opened up 2 miles of trails on the left side of the road. And we're seeing a ton of use of these trails. Over 200 riders per week. And what makes us the most happy is it's all ages and all skill levels, and many first-time mountain bikers. We have bikes on site at our global headquarters, so employees and contract workers can sign those out, and we're seeing 25 plus sign outs per week. This does provide access to not only a bike path, but also a walking path along our bluff. So those of you who are familiar with our location, we have acreage on the west side of the road that no one ever really had access to. So it provided a beautiful view from our building, but it was really kind of cut off from any usage. So now that's open to the public. Right now we're seeing about 40 to 50 man hours of maintenance per month, and we're doing that all by volunteers. So that's why we have set up the maintenance fund going forward to make sure we can keep that going. And again, that was through the Whirlpool Foundation. So I'll wrap up before I turn it over to Mike here with just a couple of photos. You can see the bikes that are available for employee use, along with helmets and a little washing station to keep the bikes clean. Our CEO and CFO, who are 2 of the most frequent users. And if you happen to be in front of Mark on the trail, I suggest getting out of the way. He goes pretty fast, and I try not to worry about that at all. And then you can see our corporate controller, Chris Conley, and his team taking advantage of the walking path and the view along the lake shore. And I wanted to wrap up with, this is the view from the lookout point. So this is what we've just made accessible to people in the community who want to take a walk out there. So with that, I will turn it over to Mike. I think you're going to segue into this, right? So this is the corridor trail proposal that I mentioned the funding to, and Mike will take it from here. So thank you.
Good morning, all. All right, click. I can do this. No, I can't. Oh, wow. It's always nice to have a good picture of yourself from some time ago. I just want to, again, thank Pam for talking about the Lakeview Trail. It's quite an exciting project, and it's going to have a great impact on our community, as we've all seen, and we've heard about this today. So, Friends of Berrien County Trails, it's an advocacy group. They've really been around here for quite a while. They came up out of the best practices. And I wanted to start with, we went out and asked for funding from 22 different communities to build our master plan, which we have here, and I have copies of it if you'd like to see it. But by getting support by 22 municipalities, we realized the passion that people have for a non-motorized trail system throughout Berrien County. And I just want to thank all the communities who are part of that, the cities, the villages, townships, all putting money into this effort. So this is, the state of Michigan is very big on non-motorized trails, hiking, biking, waterways. And this is just a little overview of some of the major trails that the state is looking at. And consider this just sort of like a bone structure, the bones of the body that other trails will connect through all of these. But so what are we talking about here? We're talking about us, we're talking about local. This is what we now call the big idea. 100 miles. Oh, what? 100 miles? 100 miles. If you look, starting down by New Buffalo, and thanks to John, the mayor of New Buffalo, we got Dave here for Chickaming Township, Michelle from New Buffalo Township, the county. Go down to New Buffalo, go down to Harbor, go down to that area, and you will see the trails that are being brought up from the border north into our area. But also look around the bend. This trail, when completed, will connect to Chicago. And that brings people to our area. That we are the Berrien County is a gateway for millions of people coming into Michigan. So that is the big idea, is connecting 100 miles where you go to Buffalo, over to Niles, Niles to Berrien Springs up to the Twin City area. That triangle is, again, the bones of this whole biking idea that we have. But the big idea is something that we need to start. We need to have a focus on how we build this structure out. But again, let's get a little more closer to us. When Pam was talking about 3 miles, all right, that's 3 miles of a walking, biking trail. What do you get for 3 miles? It's great. It goes from, it's going to be Whirlpool down to Hickman Park, that area, and North Shore. No, you get 30 miles of connectivity. That's what you get out of that 3 miles that connects everything through the Twin Cities. With that trail system, safe trail system for walking, you will engage yourself all the way down to Roosters and St. Joe. You can go all the way into Ben Harbor. You can go to the Chatterbox. You can go to the Hall Park. And you look at the development, housing development in Ben Harbor, non-motorized trail systems will be interacting with those housing systems throughout in Ben Harbor and in St. Joe. But you'll be able to connect to 5 beaches. You can go to 2 rivers for kayaking, multiple parks, a golf course, fishing, restaurants, hotels, shopping, all about connecting our communities in a very safe and healthy manner. Walking and bicycling is about your health. And I just want to give a shout out to everyone who's been involved in this. I know Gary Wood's been leading this effort for years. He can't be here today, but I just want to have the community say yes to this huge project, this huge endeavor that will help create a better community, but it's going to help on employment and retainage. This is about our folks first, but also having people come into our community to work, to live, to buy houses, and to enjoy a great area. So that is the big idea. We have been reaching out to many major stakeholders to get their input on this. But again, for our area, thank you for Whirlpool for creating this 3 miles. Thank you for that beautiful mountain biking trail that they have up there. You see families walking on it. It's a great park. It's a beautiful park. So again, thank you for everyone who's been involved in this project. It's rather audacious, but you know what? You've got to start somewhere if you can make it, if you're going to make a difference. Any questions? All right. Thank you so much.
All right, so the trails themselves obviously can't happen unless municipalities are able to actually connect together. And that's really where best practices comes in, is the kind of conversation that's happening around the table. There has been an awful lot happening in best practices. I think we're going to back the slide up to Michelle if we could. And while she's on her way up here, our chair of best practices, of which several others are in the room then also, I know she'll mention them. Please welcome the New Buffalo Township Supervisor, Michelle Height, and Chair of Best Practices.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. It's almost not morning anymore, but I'm proud to say that Best Practices Committee stands at 23 communities out of 39 in Berrien County. Our goal is that we'll have all 39 at some point. All 23 communities are unique, but have the same issues and struggles, and we all bring something valuable to the table. We welcome the City of Niles, City of Waterville, and Waterville Township to our group this year, or actually just this past few months. 3 of them brought our number to 23. Our Vice Chair and BPC Executive Board member, Chris Mason, representing the Village of Stevensville, recently stepped down. His growing business and a new baby meant way less time. We were sad to see him go, but couldn't be happier that the City of Niles Administrator Rick Huff has come on board and has also taken the open spot on the executive board. He's a wonderful addition. Housing remains a major focus for the BPC. We all have the same struggles when it comes to the need for attainable workforce housing. Many of our communities are working on this in their own way, which we discuss with each other and learn from. Many have made zoning ordinance amendments to allow for more density along with other changes, and we discuss new housing projects and how we're working towards goals. One example is Project T, which we heard from Aaron earlier, in the city of New Buffalo, or I'm sorry, the city of Benton Harbor. Aaron Hudson, who you heard from earlier, gave the BPC an update not too long ago on Project T, and we're very excited to see it moving forward. Speaking of housing, would a tiny home development make sense or be welcomed in your community? What about duplexes or quadplexes? Or would you find a NIMBY attitude towards these types of housing? How does your planning commission feel about these types of housing? How does your board or council feel? I will say in New Buffalo Township, we've heard and seen negative comments from residents that live close to property that New Buffalo Area Schools owns regarding a project the school is working on to develop property into some building and trade sites for the school, attainable housing and apartments. I've seen comments in social media saying there'll be drug dealers living there and it'll become the slums. I think some seem to misunderstand what attainable even means. And I think we need to work on the narrative to help allow housing that makes sense for the people we are trying to attract and keep. Most of our BPC communities, not all, use Medic One for their ambulance service. There have been many changes at Medic One the past year, such as new leadership and the addition of new communities. So we asked Medic One Director Jason Wiley, as part of our Ask the Expert series, to update us on changes, future plans, and how we can help him. We are surprised to hear the ambulance service is not considered an essential service. It's considered transportation by the state. Our group has talked about trying to work with our state legislators to change this classification, and we appreciate Jason taking the time to talk with us. Reliable internet, we found, particularly during the pandemic, is essential to our businesses and residents. Townships in particular have real issues with reliable internet. Berrien County, as we heard a little bit ago from Commissioner Freeling, Berrien County will commit $4.5 million. 16 townships and villages will commit over 2.9. Actually, I had 2.7. I saw your slides at 2.9 million, along with Robin Grant funding to bring broadband to our unserved and underserved areas. I think that's pretty incredible. It shows the commitment of our county commissioners and our municipal leaders to bringing reliable internet to all parts of our county and make Berrien County the place you would want to live or start a business in. The BPC thanks the county commissioners, especially Commissioner Freeling, and also our county administrator, Brian Dissett, for their hard work and for attending many of our meetings to give updates and answer questions regarding the Robin Grant applications and award. And we thank MEC also. The BPC communities continue to support each other with letters of support for grant applications and projects. We've also sent letters of support on behalf of our committee. One of these letters was in support of Harbor Habitat for Humanity's application for allotment of MISH housing and community development funds. We're a strong voice and we're happy to help. There's a struggle sometimes between what the state thinks is best for us and what municipalities and our residents think is best at times. Short-term rentals, this topic gets everyone's attention for sure. Representative Joey Andrews of the 38th District has kept our municipalities in his district informed of short-term rental legislation he is proposing. After review of his first few drafts of this short-term rental legislation, the BPC held a special meeting, which Representative Andrews came to gather input from us. His district and all the it includes all the lakefront communities in Berrien County. So this is particular interest to those in his district, but obviously impacts the communities from the 37th and 39th district as well. All we want is local control and at the very least, local input on this renewable energy and gravel mining. There's proposed legislation that would completely preempt all local authority over sand and gravel mining operations in all Michigan communities. And as part of Governor Whitmer's What's Next address, she would like to meet her clean energy goals by removing local authority over location and permitting of large-scale renewable energy facilities such as wind, solar, and large-scale battery facilities. Some of our BPC communities have adopted resolutions in opposition of this and sent copies to our state legislators and the governor. These are some of the issues with this legislation. And just to read a few of these are from Michigan Township Association Action Alert. Is no requirement to comply with existing local government land use plans, no cap on the amount of property that could be utilized in local government unit for such purposes, nullifies locally adopted zoning ordinances, including the ability for voter referendums on the issue if the application is filed with the MPSC, and it creates one-size-fits-all regulations, treating all communities as if they were identical. We all have ordinances in place to regulate land use the way we think is best, the way it is best for our health and safety of our communities. In a county that's so rich in agriculture, this should be of concern to us all. None of these issues are one-size-fits-all issues, and the BPC is committed to staying on top of these issues and others that impact us all and staying connected to our state legislators. Congressman Wahlberg attended one of our meetings to give a legislative update and talked about things he's working on. The majority of his time was spent listening to concerns of the municipal leaders. Funding for roads and other infrastructure was the overwhelming concern of all. Broadband, solar farms, shoreline erosion also came up, and we thank Congressman Wahlberg for taking the time to meet with us. Things we continue to discuss and work on: how to keep and attract young workforce, promoting our municipalities and what we have to offer, Michigan Association of Planning, redevelopment ready communities, finding public safety and utility workers, transportation, what our residents and businesses are in need of. And I added this pic of the people working together to move a couch upstairs because I think we've all been there before. This encapsulates what the BPC is about. We work together, we help each other, and we try to make Berrien County the best place to live, work, and play, hands down. And I will say too that we meet 6 times a year. So all these things I mentioned to you have happened in just 3 meetings, 2 special meetings. We've got some big picture goals, but really I think this last 6 months has been more on media issues that we've had to get together and discuss. But we work hard and we'll continue to work hard for our taxpayers in Berrien County. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate it. You wouldn't have known that you put up a friends slide, right? And then unfortunately we hear that Matthew Perry died. Matthew Perry, is that his name? Right? Matthew Perry. Right. Chandler Bing. I mean, how sad was that? All right. So with that in mind, I'll move forward to some of the very last portions of the conversation today. And one of the things that the board of directors made clear to me when coming aboard was that we ought to make sure that we talk about what the ask is. And I think it's especially important because not everybody can be in the room right now, but we videotape this entire presentation. It'll be up on the website. It can be available to you and your teams, whatever they may be, whether it be municipal leaders or local boards of directors or other not-for-profits and so forth, or maybe members of your association, such as the realtors. Lots of very good information, all of which will have all of the slides then also. The asks themselves are what are important, though. On the Best Practices Committee, we know well that participating at the local level is critical, whether that be in our local municipalities or at the county level. Big things are happening and great communication is happening across multiple different areas. Housing, I think, is obvious. It is a critical concern when it comes to what we first talked about with Hillary Doe being here, which is how are we going to keep, retain, grow, and become a prosperous Berrien County. That's going to be a housing question as much as it will be a transportation question, as an education question, and everything else. They're all interconnected. Leadership Accelerator, Dr. Flowers made it clear. Find those folks who could be your next community leaders who will participate in this 13-week, if I understand it right. And I need to be very clear too, by the way, for me to set up the Lansing trip, it requires me having Arthur Havlicek with me. If I don't do it with Arthur, he is as connected as you can be in the Lansing community and a big part of helping to make that event really a great event. Berrien County as a whole, the labor supply chain mismatch and apprenticeships. There's more to come on that, but we heard earlier what's happening with multiple different interests already around the table in the collaborative, in the consortium, whatever the right name for it may be, however we identify that in the future, it's going to require everybody in the room, whether you be an employer or a participant with folks who need to be employed. So we have lots of work to do in that arena. Harbor redevelopment and governance. That continues to be on the agenda. As you saw from our conversation today, an awful lot can happen and may happen, but still requires us to work cooperatively amongst the three communities who would participate. Friends of Berrien County Trails continues to be a big idea for the 100 miles on its way. What does that look like? What does that mean? How do we create that triangle that is the 100-mile plan, that big idea that Mayor Mike Gary shared with us? And then finally at the SLC, we appreciate the post-summit survey. Susan and I will be getting that post-summit survey out. Please engage where we are helping to build some of those interconnections that otherwise don't exist. And if they do exist, then help us understand where they are so we can all lean into those organizations who are doing it already anyway. We don't need additional organizational support. What we need is interconnectivity, more interconnectivity that helps to drive the agenda of the entire region for those things that we know matter. And then finally, your investor member support is also greatly appreciated. And with that, I turn it over to our co-chair, Jeff Fettig, who always leaves me with more work to do, and I look forward to it. So please welcome Jeff.
Well, listen, everyone, first and foremost, I want to thank Lauren for the use of your facilities and the hospitality, and what a great room, huh? Thank you, Lauren. Several of you have been, and some of you have been newer since the very beginning, but I will tell you, it's really heartwarming to see the progress we're making on a lot of fronts. Sometimes it feels like, you're pushing a rock uphill, but every once in a while you get one over the top and you see them starting to roll downhill. And I think we can all be proud of the work that all the advocates of this group have been doing and really are starting to see some meaningful progress take place in our community. It won't happen without advocacy of the entire group. I hope all of you are comfortable contacting each other for the support that you need. John and company are always there as a resource, as are Lauren and I and the entire rest of the board. So with that, I look forward to the continued great work that's being done. I'd like to thank all of you for the work and the contributions you're making to make this a better community, and look forward to seeing you at our next summit in April of 24. So thank you very much.
And Jeff, I should say thank you then also, not only to the board and to you and Lauren as co-chairs, but to Jamin and to Susan Cooper. Please give Susan a big hand for all of her work. Nancy, Tina, Michael, Sandy Plank here at Corewell Health have all been wonderful hosts for us in a new facility. And I think it would go without saying that this is a fantastic facility. Dr. Hamill, thank you very much for hosting us today. God bless, and we'll see you as we continue our collective impact work together. Thank you.